Blood soaked through the white silk of her wedding dress before the first dance even ended. Elena Varelli had married into the most dangerous crime family in the city, believing her gentle husband Adrian would shield her from the darkness. She was wrong. He died in her arms, murdered in their own ballroom. But the real nightmare began when his scarred, ruthless brother Marcus stepped over Adrian's corpse, looked at Elena with eyes that burned with something far more terrifying than grief, and said 5 words that shattered her world. "You belong to me now." If you want to see how Elena survives in a world where love and violence are the same weapon, stay until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. The Varelli estate didn't look like a place where people died. It looked like something out of a magazine. All marble columns and crystal chandeliers, gardens so perfectly manicured they seemed fake. Elena had walked through those gardens 3 months ago on Adrian's arm, and he'd told her she was safe now, that his family would protect her, that she could finally stop running. She'd wanted to believe him so badly that she'd ignored every instinct screaming otherwise. Now, standing in the bridal suite with her wedding dress pooled around her feet like a white ocean, Elena studied herself in the full-length mirror. The dress had cost more than her mother had earned in a year. The diamonds at her throat were real. The smile on her face was not. "You look beautiful," said Maria, the elderly woman who'd been assigned to help her prepare. Maria's hands were gentle as she adjusted the veil, but Elena caught the sadness in her eyes, like she was dressing a lamb for slaughter instead of a bride for her wedding. "Thank you," Elena whispered. She didn't feel beautiful. She felt like a transaction. The Varellis had needed someone clean to marry into the family, someone without connections to their world, someone who could smile for the cameras and make them look legitimate. Adrian had needed a wife to satisfy his father's demands. Elena had needed protection from the men who'd killed her father and were hunting her next. It was a fair trade, or so she'd told herself. Adrian had been kind about it, at least. During their brief engagement, he'd taken her to dinner, asked about her interests, pretended this was a real courtship. He had soft eyes and an easy smile. He didn't make her skin crawl the way some men did. "I know this isn't what you wanted," he'd said one night over wine. "But I'll be good to you, Elena. I promise." She'd believed him. What choice did she have? A knock at the door made her jump. "It's time," Maria said quietly. Elena's hands trembled as she picked up her bouquet. White roses. Of course, everything about this wedding screamed innocence and purity, a carefully constructed lie. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. The estate's grand ballroom had been transformed into something out of a dream, all white flowers and gold accents and enough candles to burn the whole place down. Hundreds of guests filled the seats, politicians, business owners, people whose smiles didn't reach their eyes. The Varelli family occupied the front rows like royalty surveying their kingdom. Elena's own section sat mostly empty. She had no family left to invite, no friends who'd dare attend a Varelli wedding, just a handful of distant relatives who'd shown up out of obligation and would leave as quickly as possible. Adrian stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, looking every inch the gentleman. When Elena reached him, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You're doing great," he murmured. The officiant began speaking, but Elena barely heard the words. Her attention kept drifting to the man standing just behind Adrian, his best man, his brother, Marcus Varelli. She'd only met him once before, briefly, at a family dinner. He hadn't said much, just watched her with dark, unreadable eyes while the others talked. Adrian had mentioned that Marcus preferred to stay out of the spotlight, that he handled the family's security concerns, which was a polite way of saying he did the dirty work nobody wanted to acknowledge. Where Adrian was handsome in a soft, approachable way, Marcus was all hard edges, taller, broader, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone and then cracked in a few places. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw, cutting through the stubble on his cheek. His suit fit perfectly, but he wore it like armor, not decoration. And he was staring at her, not the way guests stare at a bride, with joy or curiosity or boredom. Marcus looked at her like she was a problem he was trying to solve, or a mistake he was calculating how to fix. Elena forced herself to look away, to focus on Adrian's face as they exchanged vows. His voice was steady, sincere. When it came time to kiss, He leaned in carefully like he was afraid she might break. The guests applauded. Music swelled. It was done. She was Elena Varelli now, property of one of the most dangerous families in the country, whether she liked it or not. The reception began immediately after. Champagne flowed, a string quartet played, people laughed and talked and pretended this was a normal celebration, instead of a business arrangement sealed with vows. Elena smiled until her face ached, shook hands with people whose names she'd forget immediately, accepted congratulations from guests who didn't mean them. Adrian stayed close, playing the attentive husband, but even he couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept scanning the room like he was waiting for something to go wrong. "Are you okay?" Elena asked during a rare moment alone. "Fine," he said too quickly. "Just a lot of people here. Hard to keep track of everyone." "You're worried about security." He looked surprised that she'd guessed. "My father invited some business associates who don't always get along. It's fine. Marcus has people watching. Nothing will happen." But his hand tightened on his champagne glass like he was trying to convince himself. Elena followed his gaze across the ballroom. Marcus stood near the entrance, perfectly still, his dark eyes moving methodically from face to face. He looked like a predator scanning for threats, every muscle coiled and ready. And then, for just a second, his gaze locked with Elena's. The intensity in those eyes made her breath catch. It wasn't attraction, at least she didn't think it was. It was something darker, more complicated. Anger, maybe, or resentment. Like he blamed her for something she hadn't done yet. She looked away first. "Dance with me?" Adrian asked, offering his hand. The first dance. Right. Another performance for the cameras. Elena let him lead her to the center of the ballroom. The quartet shifted to a waltz, and Adrian pulled her close enough to be romantic for the guests watching, but not so close that it felt invasive. His hand rested lightly on her waist. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured as they began to move. "I know this isn't easy." "It's fine," Elena lied. "When this is over, things will be simpler. We'll find our rhythm. I meant what I said. I'll take care of you." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that maybe, somehow, this could work, that she could build a life here, strange as it was. They turned slowly in time with the music. Around them, guests had begun to join in, filling the floor with swirling couples. Elena caught glimpses of faces as they danced. Politicians wearing fake smiles, businessmen eyeing the exits, women in expensive dresses whispering behind their hands. And in every glimpse, somewhere in the background, she saw Marcus, still watching, still calculating. "Why does your brother hate me?" The question slipped out before Elena could stop it. Adrian missed a step. "What? Marcus doesn't hate you. He looks at me like I don't know, like I've done something wrong. Marcus looks at everyone like that. Don't take it personally." But Adrian's voice had gone tight. "He's protective. He doesn't trust easily. Give him time." Time. As if that would fix the way Marcus's eyes burned into her like she was something that needed to be eliminated. The song swelled toward its crescendo. Adrian spun her gently, and for a moment, Elena almost let herself feel it. The fantasy of being just a bride at her wedding, dancing with her husband, safe and wanted, and the first gunshot shattered the music. It came from somewhere near the entrance, a sharp crack that cut through the strings and the laughter and the champagne bubble conversations. For a split second, nobody moved, like they were all waiting to see if they'd really heard it or if it was just some awful mistake. Then someone screamed, and the ballroom exploded into chaos. Adrian's hand clamped around Elena's wrist, yanking her down as more shots rang out. They hit the floor hard, champagne glasses shattering around them, people shouting and running in every direction. Elena couldn't see where the shooting was coming from, just flashes of movement, bodies colliding, chairs toppling. "Stay down!" Adrian gasped, trying to cover her with his body. But then he jerked violently, his grip on her wrist loosening. Blood bloomed across the white shirt beneath his jacket, spreading fast. "Adrian!" He collapsed against her, his weight driving them both down. His eyes were wide, confused, like he couldn't understand what had just happened. "Adrian!" Elena caught him, his blood soaking into her dress, hot and wet and wrong. "No, no, no!" "Elena!" His voice came out weak, bubbling. "Run! I'm not leaving you. Run!" His eyes lost focus. The blood kept coming, too much blood, and Elena pressed her hands against the wound even though she knew it was useless. She'd seen enough death to recognize it when it was staring her in the face. Adrian died in her arms before the song even finished playing. The chaos around them continued, more gunfire, screaming, the sound of breaking glass. Elena couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her husband's blood covered her hands, her dress, everything. She didn't know how long she knelt there. Seconds. Minutes. Time didn't work right anymore. Then someone grabbed her arm, hauling her up with bruising force. Elena looked up into Marcus's face. Blood spattered across his jaw, his suit torn at the shoulder. His dark eyes were cold, empty of anything resembling grief or fear. "Let go." Elena tried to pull away. Marcus's grip tightened. "You need to move, now. Adrian is dead." The words came out flat, brutal. "And you will be too if you don't move." He didn't wait for her to comply, just dragged her away from Adrian's body, away from the center of the ballroom where the shooting had intensified. Elena's legs barely worked, stumbling over the hem of her ruined dress as Marcus pulled her toward a side exit. Around them, the Virelli security forces had engaged the attackers. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, guests, guards, men in black masks. The beautiful ballroom had transformed into a war zone in minutes. Marcus kicked open a service door and shoved Elena through. They emerged into a plain concrete hallway, the sounds of gunfire muffled but still audible. "Wait here," Marcus ordered. "Where are you?" But he was already moving back toward the door, pulling a gun from inside his jacket. He moved like a soldier, not a grieving brother. Precise, controlled, deadly. Elena pressed herself against the wall, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Her wedding dress was soaked red from Adrian's blood. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. He was dead. Her husband, her kind, gentle husband who'd promised to protect her, was dead. Murdered at their own wedding. And she was standing in a concrete hallway covered in his blood while his brother went back to kill the people who'd done it. The gunfire began to fade. Minutes crawled by. Elena counted her own heartbeats, trying to stay conscious, trying not to collapse. When the door opened again, she flinched. Marcus walked through, his gun still drawn. Blood covered his hands now, too, though she didn't know if it was his or someone else's. "Is it over?" Elena's voice came out hoarse. "For now." Marcus holstered the gun and looked at her properly for the first time. His gaze swept over her blood-soaked dress, her shaking hands, her tear-streaked face. Something flickered in his eyes, too fast to identify. "Can you walk?" Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. Marcus started down the hallway without checking if she was following. Elena forced her legs to move, trailing after him through the service corridors of the estate. They passed other security personnel, all armed, all covered in varying amounts of blood and damage. Nobody spoke to them. They emerged into what looked like a private wing of the house, less ornate than the public areas, but still expensively furnished. Marcus led her to a bedroom and opened the door. Inside, Elena hesitated at the threshold. The room was large but sparse. A bed, a dresser, heavy curtains drawn over the windows. It looked like a cell dressed up as a bedroom. "Why? Inside?" Marcus's voice left no room for argument. Elena stepped into the room. Marcus followed, closing the door behind them. For a terrible moment, they just stood there, the silence stretching tight between them. Then Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's done. 12 dead on their side, 6 on ours. Adrian's gone." His voice remained completely flat, like he was reporting inventory. "No, she's secured. I'll handle it." He hung up and looked at Elena again with those cold, calculating eyes. "Take off the dress." Elena's blood went ice cold. "What?" "You're covered in blood. There's a bathroom through there. Shower. You'll find clothes in the closet." He spoke like he was giving mission orders, not talking to his dead brother's widow. "I want to see Adrian." "No." "He's my husband." Was. Marcus took a step closer, and Elena instinctively backed up until she hit the wall. He didn't touch her, but his presence filled the space between them like a physical force. "Adrian is dead. His body is being handled. You will shower, change, and wait here until I come back." "You can't just lock me in here." "I can do whatever I want." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're in my house, under my protection now. and you will do exactly as I say. Is that clear?" Elena's throat closed up. This wasn't grief talking. This was control, pure, absolute control. And she was completely at his mercy. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Something like amusement flickered across Marcus's scarred face. Or maybe it was contempt. "Because you're valuable. Because people will come for you to get to us. Because, like it or not, you're a Varelli now." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And because I don't trust you not to run the first chance you get. I have nowhere to run to." "Exactly." Marcus straightened. "Shower, change. Don't try the windows. They're locked and alarmed. Don't try the door. There's a guard outside. Don't do anything stupid, and we'll get along fine." He turned to leave. "Marcus," Elena's voice cracked. "What happens to me now?" He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words were quiet, almost thoughtful. "That depends entirely on you." Then he was gone, the lock clicking into place behind him. Elena stood frozen for several seconds before her legs gave out. She slid down the wall, her ruined wedding dress pooling around her, and finally let herself break. Adrian was dead. Her protector, her ticket to safety, her gentle husband, gone before they'd even had a wedding night. And Marcus, his terrifying brother who looked at her like she was both a burden and a prize, had just locked her in a room like a prisoner. She'd thought marrying into the Varelli family would save her. Instead, it had trapped her in something far worse than she'd imagined. Eventually, the tears stopped. Elena forced herself to stand, her legs shaky but functional. She couldn't stay on this floor forever. Couldn't stay frozen. The bathroom was as sparse as the bedroom, clean, functional, nothing personal. Elena peeled off the blood-soaked wedding dress with trembling hands, leaving it in a white and red heap on the tile floor. The shower water ran pink when she stepped under it, washing away Adrian's blood, the makeup she'd worn for the ceremony, the last remnants of the fantasy that she could have a normal life. She stayed under the spray until the water ran clear and cold. The clothes in the closet were men's clothes, Marcus's, she assumed. Elena found the smallest shirt and a pair of sweatpants with a drawstring. They hung off her frame, but they were clean, and they weren't covered in blood. She sat on the edge of the bed and waited. Hours passed. Nobody came. Night fell outside the heavy curtains. Elena dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every small sound, her heart racing. When the lock finally clicked open again, it was deep into the night, or maybe early morning. Elena had lost track. Marcus entered carrying a tray. Food, she realized. A sandwich, fruit, water. He set it on the dresser and stepped back, watching her with that same unreadable expression. "Eat." Elena didn't move. "What happened to the people who attacked us? Dead? All of them? The ones we could find." Marcus leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. He'd changed clothes too, clean black shirt and pants, though he still looked like he'd been through a war. "The ones we missed will be found." "Who were they? Does it matter?" "Yes." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. "Your brother died protecting me from them. I think I deserve to know who killed him." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes at the mention of Adrian. Pain, maybe, or anger, but it was gone too fast to be sure. Business rivals, people who thought attacking a wedding would send a message. His jaw tightened. They were wrong. What kind of message? That the Varellis are vulnerable, that we're weak. He pushed off the wall, pacing slowly. "My father built this empire on fear and respect. Adrian was supposed to be the face of legitimacy, the son who could smile for cameras and make everyone believe we're just another rich family. Tonight proved that strategy failed." Elena watched him move, predatory and restless. "And what are you?" Marcus stopped, looking at her directly. "I'm the part of this family people don't talk about, the part that keeps us alive. By killing people." "Yes." The blunt honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. "Why am I locked in here?" Elena asked. "If you wanted me dead, I'd be dead already. So what do you want?" Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "You're smarter than I expected. Answer the question." "Your leverage. he said simply. Your family name still means something in certain circles, and you're Adrian's widow. That makes you valuable to people who want to hurt us. So until I determine what to do with you, you stay here where I can control the variables. I'm a person, not a variable. In my world, everyone is a variable. Marcus moved closer, his gaze intense. You want honesty? Fine. I didn't want Adrian to marry you. I told him it was a mistake, that bringing someone from outside into this family would create complications. But he insisted, said you needed protection, that we owed it to your father. Elena's heart stuttered. You knew my father? Everyone knew Anthony Costa. He worked for us for 15 years before he made the mistake of trying to walk away. Marcus's expression hardened. Adrian convinced our father to let him go peacefully, to let him take his daughter and disappear. That protection ended when those same business rivals found him anyway. The room tilted. You're saying my father worked for the Varellis? He ran our accounting, knew where every dollar came from and where it went. When he wanted out, he became a liability. Marcus watched her face carefully. Adrian felt guilty about it. Thought marrying you would somehow make it right. I told him it wouldn't, that you'd be a weakness someone would exploit. And now? Now he's dead, and I was right. Marcus's voice went cold. But he's also dead, and that means his debts transferred to me, including his widow. Elena's hands were shaking again. Everything she thought she knew, every piece of the story Adrian had told her, was a lie. Her father hadn't been an innocent accountant caught in the crossfire. He'd worked for these people, had been part of their world, and Adrian hadn't married her out of kindness. He'd married her out of guilt. I want to leave, she said quietly. No. You said I'm leverage. Fine. Tell whoever wants me that I'm available. Let them come get me. I don't want any part of this anymore. Marcus moved so fast, Elena didn't have time to react. One moment he was across the room, the next his hand was wrapped around her throat, not squeezing, just holding her in place, forcing her to look at him. You don't get to choose, he said softly. You stopped having choices the moment you married into this family. Whether you like it or not, you're a Varelli now. That name is branded on you. You can't wash it off, can't run from it. The only question is whether you accept it or spend the rest of your very short life fighting against it. Elena met his eyes, her pulse hammering against his palm. Why do you care if I accept it or not? For a moment, Marcus didn't answer. His thumb brushed against her jaw, almost gentle, completely at odds with the threat in his grip. Then he released her and stepped back. Eat, sleep. Tomorrow we'll discuss what happens next. He left without another word, the lock clicking behind him. Elena sat in the silence, her hand pressed to her throat, where she could still feel the ghost of his touch. Her mind raced through everything he'd told her, about her father, about Adrian, about why she was really here. She'd married into the Varelli family, thinking it would save her. But salvation had never been on the table, just different versions of the same trap, closing around her from every angle. And Marcus, scarred, brutal Marcus, who looked at her like she was simultaneously worthless and precious, held all the keys. Elena pulled the tray of food closer and forced herself to eat, not because she was hungry, but because she needed strength for whatever came next. If she was going to survive in this world, she needed to stop being the helpless widow everyone expected her to be. She needed to become something else entirely. 3 days passed before Marcus came back. 3 days of meals delivered by silent guards who wouldn't meet her eyes. 3 days of staring at the same 4 walls, testing the windows that wouldn't open, listening to footsteps in the hallway that never stopped. 3 days of Elena pacing the room like a caged animal, her mind running through every possible escape route and finding none. She'd tried the door on the second day. The guard outside had simply pushed her back inside without a word, his hand firm on her shoulder. Not violent, but not gentle either. A reminder that she was property now, not a person. On the morning of the 4th day, the lock clicked and Marcus walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his jaw was covered in several days' worth of stubble, and there was a fresh cut above his eyebrow that hadn't been there before. But his clothes were clean, his movements controlled. Whatever hell he'd been through, he was still functioning. Get dressed, he said without preamble. Something decent. You have 10 minutes. Elena stood from where she'd been sitting on the bed. Why? Because I said so. That's not an answer. Marcus's eyes narrowed. You want answers? Fine. Adrian's funeral is in 2 hours. You're expected to attend. My father wants to see the grieving widow stand by the grave and play her part. So you're going to put on a black dress, keep your mouth shut, and do exactly what I tell you to do. Clear? The words hit like a slap. Adrian's funeral. Of course. She'd been so focused on her own imprisonment that she'd almost forgotten he was dead. Almost forgotten that 4 days ago, she'd held him while he bled out on a ballroom floor. Shame burned through her chest. I don't have any clothes, she said quietly. Marcus gestured toward the closet. Look again. Elena opened the closet door. Where before there had only been Marcus's oversized shirts and pants, now a section of women's clothing hung neatly. Black dresses mostly. Morning clothes. Someone had been in here while she slept. The thought made her skin crawl. She pulled out the simplest dress she could find, black, long-sleeved, high-necked. Nothing fancy. Nothing that screamed, look at me. She wanted to disappear today, not perform. 8 minutes, Marcus said from behind her. Elena turned. Can I have some privacy? No. Excuse me? I don't trust you not to do something stupid. Change or don't. Your choice. Heat flooded Elena's face. You're not serious. Marcus crossed his arms and leaned against the wall, his expression bored. 7 minutes. Bastard. Elena grabbed the dress and stalked into the bathroom, slamming the door harder than necessary. She changed quickly, her hands shaking with anger more than fear now. When she emerged, Marcus was still waiting in the same position, utterly unmoved. Shoes are by the door, he said. Let's go. The heels were simple black pumps that fit well enough. Elena slipped them on and followed Marcus out of the room for the first time in 4 days. The hallway beyond was as sterile as she remembered. Cream walls, expensive art that meant nothing, thick carpet that muffled every sound. They passed other rooms, all with closed doors. Voices filtered through some of them. Conversations Elena couldn't make out. The Varelli estate was enormous, sprawling across what had to be several acres. She'd only seen a fraction of it on her wedding day. Wedding day. The phrase tasted like poison now. Marcus led her down a grand staircase into a foyer that opened onto the circular driveway. Black cars lined up like a funeral procession, because that's exactly what they were. Men in dark suits stood beside them, smoking, talking in low voices. They all stopped when Marcus appeared, their eyes tracking to Elena with varying degrees of interest and contempt. She lifted her chin and kept walking. Marcus opened the door to one of the cars, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. Inside, Elena slid into the back seat. Marcus followed, sitting beside her but maintaining a careful distance. The driver got in without a word and pulled away from the estate. They drove in silence through the city. Elena watched the buildings pass. The people on the streets living their normal lives, oblivious to the fact that she was trapped in a nightmare. She wanted to scream at them, to bang on the windows and beg for help. But what would be the point? Nobody helped people like her. Nobody crossed the Varellis. Where's the funeral? She asked, more to break the silence than because she cared. Family plot, about 20 minutes outside the city. Marcus didn't look at her when he spoke. His gaze was fixed on something outside the window, his jaw tight. Will there be a lot of people? Enough. What am I supposed to say if someone asks me questions? Nothing. You don't speak unless I tell you to. Marcus finally turned to look at her, his dark eyes flat. You stand where I put you, you cry if you can manage it, and you don't draw attention. That's all. I'm his widow. People will expect what I tell them to expect. His voice dropped into something dangerous. You seem to be confused about your position here, Elena. So let me clarify. You are not a grieving widow with rights and autonomy. You are a liability I'm managing until I decide what to do with you. The only reason you're breathing is because killing you would create more problems than it solves. Don't make me reconsider that calculation. Elena's throat tightened. You're threatening to kill me. I'm stating facts. Marcus turned back to the window. Adrian's death left a power vacuum. Other families are circling, looking for weaknesses. My father is old and getting older. That leaves me to hold everything together while people tear at the edges, trying to take what's ours. I don't have time to babysit you or coddle your feelings. So you play your part today, and maybe I'll let you keep living in that room instead of somewhere less comfortable. The rest of the drive passed in brittle silence. The family cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking the city, surrounded by iron gates and stone walls. Expensive, private. The kind of place where rich people put their dead so they didn't have to think about mortality mixing with common folk. Cars were already parked along the narrow road when they arrived. Marcus got out first and came around to open Elena's door, offering his hand like a gentleman. She took it because refusing would cause a scene, and his fingers closed around hers with just enough pressure to remind her who was in control. The gathered crowd turned to watch them approach. Elena recognized some faces from the wedding, politicians, business associates, people who'd probably celebrated Adrian's death over champagne while pretending to mourn. Others were strangers. All of them studied Elena like she was something curious and vaguely distasteful. The grave had already been dug. A simple casket, mahogany, elegant, obscenely expensive, sat beside it on brass supports. White flowers covered everything, their sickly, sweet smell making Elena's stomach turn. Marcus guided her to the front row of chairs, his hand firm on her lower back. An older man sat in the center seat, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the grief that should have destroyed him. Elena recognized him from photos. Vincent Virelli, the patriarch, the man who'd built this empire on blood and brutality. He looked up as they approached, his pale eyes moving from Marcus to Elena and back again. "She's here." "As requested," Marcus said. Vincent's gaze settled on Elena, assessing. "You're smaller than I expected." Elena didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. "Sit." Vincent gestured to the chair beside him. Elena sat. Marcus remained standing behind her, a silent presence that felt more like a guard than family. The service began. A priest spoke words that meant nothing. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, all the platitudes people said when someone died violently and everyone pretended it was peaceful. Elena barely heard it. Her attention kept drifting to the casket, trying to reconcile that Adrian's body was inside, that the man who'd promised to protect her was reduced to this. She should cry. That's what widows did at funerals. But the tears wouldn't come. Everything felt distant, muffled, like she was watching this happen to someone else. Vincent leaned closer to her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Adrian spoke highly of you." Elena blinked. "Sir?" "My son. He said you were stronger than you looked, that you'd survived things that would have broken other people." Vincent's weathered face remained impassive. "Was he right?" "I don't know. You will." He straightened, returning his attention to the priest. The service ended. People filed past the casket, offering condolences to Vincent that sounded rehearsed and hollow. Elena watched them, these predators in expensive suits, and wondered how many of them had wanted Adrian dead. When it was finally time to lower the casket, Marcus touched her shoulder. "Stand up." Elena stood. The coffin descended slowly into the earth, and she thought she should feel something, sadness, rage, anything. But there was just numbness, a vast, empty space where emotion should have been. Someone handed her a white rose. The symbol was obvious. Purity, mourning, all the things she was supposed to represent. Elena dropped it onto the casket without ceremony and turned away. The reception was held back at the estate, because of course it was. The same ballroom where Adrian had died had been cleaned and repurposed, all evidence of violence scrubbed away like it never happened. Elena wondered if her blood-soaked wedding dress was still somewhere in this house, or if they'd burned it. Marcus stayed close as people offered their condolences. Most ignored Elena entirely, directing their sympathy to Vincent or Marcus as if she didn't exist. A few acknowledged her with cold nods and colder eyes. Mrs. Virelli, a man in an expensive gray suit, appeared at her elbow, his smile sharp. "My condolences for your loss." "Thank you," Elena said automatically. "Robert Chen," the man introduced himself. "I did business with your late husband. Such a tragedy." "Yes." "You must be devastated." His eyes said he didn't believe it for a second. "If there's anything I can do to help during this difficult time..." Marcus materialized beside Elena before she could respond. "Mr. Chen, I didn't realize you were invited." The temperature in the immediate vicinity dropped about 20 degrees. Chen's smile didn't falter. "I wanted to pay my respects." "How thoughtful." Marcus's hand settled on Elena's waist, proprietary. But my sister-in-law is tired. I'm sure you understand. Of course. Chen's gaze flickered between them, calculating. We'll speak again soon, Mrs. Varelli. He disappeared into the crowd. Who was that? Elena asked. Someone who wants something he can't have. Marcus steered her toward the edge of the room. Don't talk to him again. I don't care what you were or weren't doing. Stay away from him. Marcus's jaw was tight, his hand still on her waist. In fact, don't talk to anyone unless I'm standing right next to you. For how long? Forever? Until I say otherwise. Elena jerked away from him. I'm not a dog you can command. No. You're a widow at a funeral, which makes you vulnerable to every shark in this room looking for an angle. Marcus caught her wrist before she could walk away. I know you're angry. I know you want to fight me on everything because it makes you feel less powerless. But right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and a dozen different ways to die. So swallow your pride, stay close, and try not to do anything that gets us both killed. His grip wasn't painful, but it was unbreakable. Elena met his eyes and saw something there beyond the usual cold control, genuine concern maybe, or just pragmatism. Hard to tell with Marcus. Fine, she said quietly. He released her wrist but didn't step away. 2 more hours. Then we can leave. The hours dragged. Elena stood beside Marcus while people came and went, offering empty condolences and emptier promises. She smiled when expected, nodded at the right moments, played the perfect grieving widow. And the whole time, she watched. Watched the way Marcus tracked everyone who approached them, the subtle tension in his shoulders when certain people got too close. Watched Vincent hold court in the center of the room, accepting sympathy like a king receiving tribute. Watched the guards positioned at every exit, their hands never far from concealed weapons. This wasn't a funeral reception. It was a battlefield disguised as a social gathering. By the time Marcus finally led her back to the car, Elena's face hurt from holding false expressions, and her feet ached from the heels. She kicked them off as soon as she was in the back seat and closed her eyes. You did well, Marcus said as they pulled away from the estate. Elena opened her eyes to find him watching her. I stood there and said nothing. That's not exactly difficult. You'd be surprised how many people can't even manage that. He loosened his tie, the first sign of relaxation she'd seen from him all day. My father was impressed. Should I be honored? You should be smart. Marcus leaned back against the seat. Vincent doesn't impress easily. The fact that he spoke to you at all is significant. He asked if Adrian was right about me. What did that mean? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Adrian believed you could adapt, that you were tougher than you looked. My father wanted to see for himself. And he saw someone who didn't fall apart under pressure, someone who might actually survive in this world. Marcus's gaze remained steady on her. Whether that's good or bad remains to be seen. They lapsed back into silence. Elena watched the city lights blur past the window, her mind churning through everything that had happened. The funeral, the reception, the predators circling with their false sympathy and real threats. She'd survived today. Barely. But how many more days like this could she endure? When they arrived back at the estate, Marcus walked her to her room, her prison, and unlocked the door. Elena expected him to push her inside and leave like always. Instead, he followed her in and closed the door behind them. Elena's pulse spiked. What are you doing? We need to talk. Marcus moved to the window and checked the locks, then swept the room with his eyes like he was looking for surveillance equipment. Sit down. I've been sitting all day. Elena. Her name came out sharp. Sit down. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap. Marcus remained standing, pacing slowly, his expression troubled in a way she'd never seen before. What happened at the wedding? He began, then stopped. Started again. The attack wasn't random. You said they were business rivals. They were, but someone gave them intel. Exact timing, security positions where Adrian would be standing. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. It was too precise. Too planned. Elena's stomach dropped. You're saying someone inside helped them? Yes. Who? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He stopped pacing and looked at her directly. Which is why I need to know everything Adrian told you. Every conversation, every detail about his work, who he met with, what he was planning. I barely knew him. We were engaged for 2 months, and most of that time he was traveling or in meetings. We didn't exactly have deep conversations. Then tell me what you do know. Marcus pulled the chair from the desk and sat backward on it, his arms resting on the back. Start with how you met. Elena didn't want to relive this, but the look in Marcus's eyes said she didn't have a choice. He came to the diner where I was working, sat in my section for 3 days straight before he finally talked to me. What did he say? Asked if I knew who he was. I said no. He seemed to like that. Elena remembered the conversation clearly, remembered thinking Adrian seemed lonely despite his expensive suit and easy smile. He told me his name, said he wanted to take me to dinner. I said no because I thought he was just some rich guy looking for entertainment. He came back the next day with flowers and asked again. And you said yes. Not right away, but he was persistent, kind. He didn't push, didn't make me uncomfortable. Elena's throat tightened. Eventually, I agreed to one dinner, then another. By the third date, he told me who his family was. Marcus's expression remained neutral. How did you react? I tried to end it. Told him I didn't want anything to do with that world. Elena laughed bitterly. He said he understood, that he didn't want that world either, that he was trying to build something different. Did he say what? Legitimate businesses, real estate development, tech investments, things that didn't involve... She gestured vaguely. You know. Crime, Marcus supplied flatly. Yes. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. Elena met Marcus's gaze. My father was dead. The people who killed him were looking for me. I had no money, no protection, nowhere to go. When Adrian offered marriage and safety, I took it because the alternative was dying in some alley with a bullet in my head. Something flickered across Marcus's face, understanding, maybe, or just recognition of a familiar desperation. Did Adrian ever mention being threatened? Someone pressuring him, making demands? Elena thought back through their limited conversations. No, but like I said, we didn't talk much about his work. He kept that separate. What about the week before the wedding? Did anything seem off? He was stressed, nervous. I thought it was just pre-wedding anxiety, but Elena paused, remembering. The night before the ceremony, he came to my room, said he needed to tell me something. Marcus leaned forward. What? He didn't get the chance. His phone rang and he had to leave. He said we'd talk after the wedding. Elena's voice dropped. We never got the chance. Marcus stood abruptly and resumed pacing. Someone knew the attack was coming and didn't warn him, or worse, warned him and he ignored it. Why would he ignore a threat? Because he was trying to prove something. Marcus's voice was tight with old anger. Adrian wanted to believe people could change, that violence wasn't the only answer. He thought if he showed mercy, if he built bridges instead of burning them, the family could evolve into something better. That sounds noble. Sounds naive. Marcus stopped at the window, staring out at the dark grounds. This world doesn't reward nobility. It rewards strength, fear, and the willingness to do what others won't. Adrian knew that, but he chose to believe otherwise. It got him killed. The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief Marcus refused to show, and anger he couldn't quite contain. I didn't know him well, Elena said quietly, but he was kind to me when he didn't have to be. That has to count for something. It counts for nothing when you're dead. Marcus's reflection in the window glass looked haunted. Kindness is a luxury we can't afford. Then what can you afford? He turned from the window and the look in his eyes made Elena's breath catch. Survival, control, making sure the people who killed my brother don't get to celebrate for very long. You're going after them. I'm going to burn their entire operation to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. His voice was calm, almost conversational, which made the words even more chilling. And anyone who helped them, anyone who knew and didn't warn us, anyone who benefited from Adrian's death, they burn too. Elena should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual brutality in his tone, but all she felt was a dark satisfaction that someone was going to make them pay. How long will that take? She asked. As long as it takes. Marcus moved toward the door. Until then, you stay here. Stay safe. Stay out of my way. Wait. Elena stood. You can't just lock me in this room forever. Watch me. Marcus. He rounded on her so fast she took an involuntary step back. Do you know what they'll do to you if they get their hands on you? The people who killed Adrian, the rivals circling for territory, even some of our own people who think you're a liability? His voice dropped dangerously low. They'll use you, Elena. They'll torture you for information, leverage you against this family, or just kill you to send a message. The only reason you're still breathing is because I'm keeping you locked away where they can't reach you. So I'm a prisoner for my own protection. Yes. That's not living. That's just dying slowly. Marcus's jaw tightened. Would you prefer to die quickly? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and real. Elena met his gaze and refused to look away. I'd prefer to have a choice, she said quietly. For a long moment, Marcus just stared at her. Then he turned and walked to the door. You don't get choices. Not anymore. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. He left, the lock clicking into place with brutal finality. Elena stood in the middle of the room, her hands shaking with impotent rage. She'd played the perfect widow today, had stood beside Marcus and Vincent and all those dangerous men, had smiled and nodded and acted like the grief wasn't crushing her. But grief wasn't what was crushing her. It was the weight of this cage, gilded as it was. The knowledge that she'd traded one death sentence for another, slower form of dying. She couldn't do this. Couldn't spend the rest of her life in this room, waiting for Marcus to decide her fate. Elena went to the window and pressed her palm against the glass. Beyond it, the estate grounds stretched dark and vast. Freedom was right there, just on the other side of locked windows and armed guards, and a man who controlled her life with brutal efficiency. But freedom existed. She just had to figure out how to take it. The next morning, a guard delivered breakfast in a newspaper. Elena almost ignored it. What did she care about the outside world when she was trapped in here? But boredom made her flip through it anyway. The headline stopped her cold. Varelli wedding massacre, 12 dead. Rival family suspected. Below it, a photo of the estate, emergency vehicles lining the driveway. And smaller, in the corner, a photo of Adrian from some charity event, smiling at the camera, like he didn't have a care in the world. Elena read the article twice. It was mostly speculation and carefully worded non-information. The police were investigating. No arrests had been made. The Varelli family declined to comment. But buried in the middle, one line made her breath stop. Sources close to the family suggest the attack may have been an inside job, raising questions about loyalty within the organization. So Marcus had been right. Someone inside had betrayed them. And whoever it was, they were still out there, still a threat. Elena set down the newspaper and stared at the locked door. Marcus was hunting traitors and enemies while keeping her locked away like a piece of valuable furniture. But what if she didn't have to sit here uselessly? What if there was a way to make herself valuable enough that he had to let her out? The idea was dangerous, probably stupid, but it was better than slowly losing her mind in this room. Elena started paying attention to everything, the guards' routines, when they changed shifts, the sounds from other parts of the house, trying to map the layout in her mind, the scraps of conversation she could hear through the door. On the 5th day of her imprisonment, the lock clicked open at an unusual time, mid-afternoon instead of morning or evening. Elena looked up from the book she'd been pretending to read. Marcus stood in the doorway, and he looked like death. Blood soaked his shirt, fresh and dark. His knuckles were split and swollen. A deep gash ran along his collarbone, and his left eye was beginning to swell shut. He stumbled into the room and kicked the door shut behind him. Jesus, Elena breathed. What happened? Nothing. Marcus's voice came out rough, strained. He made it 3 steps before his legs gave out and he went down hard, catching himself on the edge of the dresser. Elena was moving before she thought about it, crossing the room to grab his arm before he hit the floor completely. You need a hospital. No hospitals. He shook her off and tried to stand. Failed. Just need to sit down for a minute. You need stitches. You're bleeding everywhere. I'm fine. You're clearly not fine. Elena grabbed a shirt from the closet and pressed it against the wound on his collarbone. Hold this. Marcus complied, his hand covering hers for a moment before she pulled away. His skin was hot, feverish. How much blood had he lost? Where's your first aid kit? Elena demanded. Bathroom, under the sink. She found it quickly, a well-stocked medical kit that suggested this wasn't the first time someone had needed emergency treatment in this room. Elena grabbed it and returned to find Marcus slumped against the side of the bed, his eyes closed. Stay awake, she ordered, trying. Elena knelt beside him and carefully peeled back the blood-soaked shirt. The gash was deep but clean, probably a knife. It needed proper medical attention, but she could at least stop the bleeding and prevent infection. This is going to hurt, she warned. Everything hurts. Marcus opened his one good eye to look at her. Just do it. Elena cleaned the wound as carefully as she could, trying not to flinch when Marcus hissed in pain. His muscles were tensed like iron under her hands, every line of his body screaming with barely controlled agony. You should have gone to a hospital, she muttered. Can't. Too many questions. His breathing was labored. Hospital means police. Police means problems. You could die from infection. Won't be the first time I've taken that risk. Elena started stitching, her hands steadier than she expected. She'd learned basic field medicine from her father, another piece of her past she'd tried to forget. Turned out some skills never left you. Who did this? She asked, keeping her voice calm, conversational. Anything to keep him talking, keep him conscious. The people who killed Adrian. Marcus's voice was getting thicker. Found their safe house. They weren't happy to see me. How many? 5. 4 now. You killed them. Most of them. Elena tied off the last stitch and moved to clean the cuts on his knuckles. You're insane. Probably. He was watching her work, his gaze heavy and unreadable. You're good at this. My father taught me. Said in his line of work, knowing how to patch people up was a valuable skill. Elena's hands paused. I didn't know until yesterday that his line of work was yours. Would it have changed anything if you'd known? She thought about it honestly. No. I still would have married Adrian, still would have taken the protection he offered. Even knowing what that protection would cost? I didn't know it would cost his life. Elena finished with his hands and sat back. Take off your shirt. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You have blood all over you, and I need to see if there are any other injuries, Elena said flatly. Take it off, or I leave you to bleed. He struggled out of the ruined shirt, moving slowly, painfully. Elena tried not to look at the scars covering his torso, some old and faded, others newer. A roadmap of violence written on his skin. She found 2 more cuts, both shallow, and cleaned them quickly. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline wearing off to leave her exhausted and unsettled. When she was finished, Marcus caught her wrist. Thank you. Elena met his eyes. You would have done it yourself if I hadn't. Yes, but it would have hurt more. They stayed like that for a moment, his hand warm around her wrist, his blood on her hands. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. Then Marcus released her and tried to stand. This time he made it, though he swayed slightly. You should rest, Elena said. Can't. Still have work to do. You're barely standing. I've functioned on worse. But he didn't move toward the door, just stood there, looking at her with that same unreadable expression he'd worn at the funeral. What? Elena demanded. You could have let me bleed out, would have solved your problem. The thought hadn't even occurred to her. What problem? Me. I'm the one keeping you locked in here. Without me, you might be able to negotiate your freedom with Vincent or one of the others. Elena stood, facing him across the small space. You think I'd let you die just to escape? Most people would. I'm not most people. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. No, you're not. He left without another word, and Elena was alone again with blood on her hands and questions burning in her mind. Why had he come here, to this room, when he was injured? He had to have medical personnel on staff, people trained for this. Yet he'd stumbled into her prison instead. And why did some part of her feel relieved that she'd been able to help him? Elena washed the blood from her hands and tried not to think about the answer. Marcus didn't come back for 3 days. Elena counted the hours by meals delivered, by the changing light through the window, by the sound of footsteps in the hallway that were never his. She told herself she didn't care, that she was just bored and looking for any variation in the monotony. But every time the lock clicked, her pulse jumped with something that felt uncomfortably like anticipation. On the third night, she woke to the sound of breaking glass. Elena jerked upright in bed, her heart hammering. The noise had come from somewhere below her window in the gardens. She pressed herself against the wall and listened. Voices. Angry. Urgent. Then gunfire. Short, controlled bursts that shattered the night silence. She'd heard enough gunfights to know this wasn't a movie. This was real, happening right now, close enough that she could smell the cordite drifting through the window sills. The door burst open without warning. A guard she didn't recognize grabbed her arm. Move. Now. What's happening? Move. He hauled her out of bed, not caring that she was only wearing an oversized t-shirt and underwear. His grip bruised as he dragged her into the hallway. More guards rushed past them, weapons drawn. Orders were being shouted somewhere below. Elena's bare feet slapped against the marble floor as the guard pulled her down a corridor she'd never seen before, deeper into the estate's private wings. They stopped at a heavy steel door set into the wall like a bank vault. The guard punched in a code and shoved Elena through. Stay here. Don't open this door for anyone except me or Marcus Varelli. Understand? Elena nodded mutely. The door slammed shut and locks engaged with heavy mechanical clicks. She was in some kind of safe room. No windows, reinforced walls, a single overhead light that cast everything in harsh white. There was a cot in one corner, a table with bottled water and emergency rations, and a phone mounted on the wall. Elena picked up the phone. Deadline. Of course. More gunfire erupted, closer now. She could hear it even through the thick walls, the distinctive crack of rifles, the deeper boom of shotguns, men shouting orders and curses. The estate was under attack, and she was locked in a box with no way to know what was happening. Time stretched and warped. Minutes felt like hours. The gunfire intensified, then gradually faded. Silence fell, broken only by her own ragged breathing. Elena sat on the cot and waited. When the locks finally disengaged, she didn't know how long it had been. The door swung open and Marcus filled the doorway, his shirt torn and blood spattered, a rifle slung over his shoulder. "You're okay," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena stood on shaking legs. What happened? Chen made his move. Marcus's voice was flat, exhausted. Thought he could take advantage of the chaos from Adrian's death. Sent his people to breach the estate. Did they? They're dead. All of them. He stepped aside. Come on. This room's secure, but I want you somewhere I can see you. Elena followed him back through the corridors. Bodies lay scattered in the hallway. Chen's men, she assumed, their blood pooling on expensive carpet. She stepped over them numbly, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. Marcus led her to a different room this time, larger than her usual prison. It looked like an office, massive desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a sitting area with leather furniture. One wall was entirely windows, bulletproof glass that overlooked the estate grounds where fires still burned in the darkness. Whose office is this? Elena asked. Mine. Marcus locked the door behind them and set the rifle against the wall. Sit down before you fall down. She hadn't realized she was swaying until he said it. Elena sank into one of the leather chairs, her legs finally giving out. How many? 12 of his, 3 of ours. Marcus moved to a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of something amber. He pressed one into Elena's hand. Drink. She did, and the whiskey burned all the way down. Is it over? For tonight. Marcus drained his own glass and poured another. Chen's dead. I put a bullet in his head myself, but he won't be the last. Adrian's death left us vulnerable, and everyone knows it. How long can you keep fighting like this? As long as I have to. But he sounded tired, bone-deep tired in a way that had nothing to do with the night's violence. He stood at the windows, staring out at the fires, his shoulders rigid with tension. Elena studied him in the dim light. Blood and soot smeared his face. His hands were scraped raw, and she could see him favoring his left side where the stitches she'd put in were probably pulling. You need medical attention, she said. Later. Marcus, I said later. He turned from the window, and the look in his eyes stopped her cold. Not anger, Something rawer, more desperate. I need to think. Need to figure out who's next, how to shore up our defenses, where the next attack will come from. You need to sleep. I'll sleep when I'm dead. He laughed, sharp and bitter, which at this rate won't be long. Elena set down her glass. Sit down. Elena, sit down. She used the same tone he'd used on her 100 times, and to her surprise he obeyed, dropped into the chair across from her like his strings had been cut. Up close, she could see the toll the last week had taken. The dark circles under his eyes had deepened to bruises. His face was thinner, sharper. He looked like a man running on nothing but rage and willpower. When did you last eat? Elena asked. Marcus had to think about it. Yesterday, maybe. And sleep? Couple hours here and there. You can't function like this. I don't have a choice. His voice cracked slightly. Every second I'm not working, I'm giving our enemies time to plan their next move. Every moment I rest is another opportunity for someone to put a knife in my back. And if you collapse from exhaustion, what then? Who holds everything together? Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. You don't understand how this works. Then explain it to me. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift behind his eyes. A decision being made. This family is held together by fear and respect in equal measure. My father built that over 40 years. Adrian was supposed to be the next generation, the acceptable face that made us look legitimate, while I handled the ugly necessities. But with him gone, there's a vacuum, and every rival family, every ambitious underboss, every two-bit enforcer with delusions of grandeur can see it. So you have to prove you're strong enough to fill it. I have to prove I'm terrifying enough that nobody dares challenge me. Marcus leaned back in the chair. Which means I can't show weakness, can't slow down, can't afford to be anything less than the monster they're all afraid of. Elena thought about the bodies in the hallway, the blood on his hands, the cold efficiency with which he'd talked about killing Chen. You're not a monster. You don't know what I've done. I know you came to my room when you were injured instead of going to your own people. I know you've kept me alive when killing me would have been simpler. I know you're exhausted and grieving and trying to hold together an empire that's tearing itself apart. She met his gaze steadily. Monsters don't do those things. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're naive. I'm realistic. Monsters don't feel guilty about what they do. You do. How would you know? Because you can't sleep. Because you're killing yourself trying to be everything to everyone. Because you look at me sometimes like you can't figure out if I'm a person or a problem, and that confusion bothers you. Elena leaned forward. A real monster wouldn't care. The silence stretched between them, charged with something Elena couldn't name. Marcus stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her instead of just calculating her value or threat level. Adrian was right about you, he said finally. You are stronger than you look. I had to be. Weak people don't survive in my world either. Your world. Marcus's expression turned thoughtful. What was it like before all this? Nobody had asked her that. Not Adrian, not Vincent, nobody. They'd all been too focused on using her or protecting her or managing her to care about who she'd been before she became Elena Virelli. Poor, Elena said simply. My father worked constantly, trying to make enough to keep us fed and safe. After my mother left, it was just the two of us. He taught me how to take care of myself, how to recognize danger, how to patch wounds and disappear when necessary. I thought he was just paranoid. Turns out he was preparing me for exactly the kind of life he was trying to escape. Do you hate him for it? For bringing this world to your doorstep? Elena considered the question honestly. Sometimes, but mostly I just miss him. He wasn't perfect, but he tried to protect me the only way he knew how. By working for the Virellis. By doing what he had to do to keep me alive. She paused. Same thing you're doing now. Marcus flinched like she'd struck him. It's not the same. Isn't it? You're destroying yourself to protect your family, making choices that eat at you because the alternative is letting everything fall apart. How is that different? Because I chose this life. You didn't. Neither did Adrian, really. He was born into it, same as you. Elena watched emotions flicker across Marcus's face. Grief, anger, something that might have been regret. He told me once that he wished he could have been someone else, done something that mattered beyond maintaining an empire built on fear. When did he tell you that? The second time we had dinner. He'd had too much wine and got philosophical. The memory made her chest tight. He said the only good thing about being a Varelli was having enough power to actually help people sometimes. That maybe if he could use that power right, he could balance out all the bad. Marcus stood abruptly and went back to the window. He was an idealist. It got him killed. Or someone's betrayal got him killed, and his idealism had nothing to do with it. His idealism made him trust people he shouldn't have trusted. Marcus's reflection in the glass looked haunted. He wanted to believe in the best of people, refused to see threats until they were already pulling the trigger. And you see threats everywhere. Because they're everywhere. He turned to face her. You think I'm paranoid. But I've kept this family alive through 3 attempted coups, 2 federal investigations, and more assassination attempts than I can count. Adrian's way got him a grave. My way keeps people breathing. It also keeps you isolated and exhausted and one bad night away from a breakdown. Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her shoulders, yanking her out of the chair. Elena's breath caught, but she didn't pull away, just met his gaze as he loomed over her, his grip tight enough to hurt. You want to know the truth? His voice was rough, barely controlled. I'm one bad night away from burning this entire empire to the ground and walking away. I'm one moment of weakness from putting a bullet in my own head because I'm so tired of carrying this weight. I'm hanging on by my fingernails, and the only thing keeping me going is knowing that if I fall, everyone who depends on me dies. Then let someone help you carry it. There's no one. I'm here. The words came out before Elena could think them through. I'm not asking you to trust me with everything, but you don't have to do all of this alone. Marcus stared at her, his hands still gripping her shoulders, his breathing ragged. Why would you help me? I've kept you prisoner, treated you like property, given you every reason to hate me. Because despite all that, you've also kept me alive. Because I watched you grieve your brother while pretending you didn't care. Because I stitched your wounds and saw how much you're hurting underneath all the control. Elena lifted her hand to his face, her palm against the scarred side. Because I think you're drowning, and I know what that feels like. For a moment, Marcus didn't move, just stood frozen with her hand on his face, his eyes searching hers for lies or manipulation, or whatever he was used to finding in people. Then something in him broke. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. There was nothing tender about the way his mouth crashed into hers, desperate and almost violent. His hands moved from her shoulders to her hair, tangling in it, holding her in place like he was afraid she'd disappear. Elena should have pushed him away, should have been horrified, disgusted, anything but this. But she found herself kissing him back just as desperately, her hands fisting in his ruined shirt, pulling him closer instead of shoving him away. It was wrong on every level. He was her dead husband's brother, her jailer, the man who held her life in his blood-stained hands. But in that moment, she didn't care about any of it, just needed this connection, this proof that she was still alive and feeling something other than fear and numbness. Marcus pulled back first, breathing hard, his forehead pressed against hers. This is a mistake. Probably. We shouldn't. I know. But neither of them moved apart. They stood there in the dim office, the fires still burning outside, the bodies still cooling in the hallways, and something between them had shifted irrevocably. I didn't hate you, Marcus said quietly. At the wedding. You thought I hated you, but I didn't. Elena's pulse was racing. Then what was it? I wanted you. The confession came out raw, reluctant. Watched you for weeks before Adrian ever approached you. Followed you home from that diner, made sure you were safe, told myself I was just doing reconnaissance, but I knew what I was really doing. The admission should have terrified her. Instead, it made a sick kind of sense. Why didn't you approach me yourself? Because Adrian saw you first. Because he called dibs like we were children fighting over a toy. Marcus's laugh was bitter. Because I knew if I got close to you, I'd want to keep you, and wanting things makes you vulnerable. So I let Adrian have you and convinced myself I was fine with it. But you weren't. No, I stood in that ballroom watching you marry my brother and imagined putting a bullet in his head so I could have you instead. His hands tightened in her hair. Then someone else did it for me. And I got exactly what I wanted in the worst possible way. Elena pulled back enough to see his face properly. Is that why you locked me up? To keep me away from yourself? To keep you safe. To keep me from doing something we'd both regret. To give myself time to figure out if you were just an obsession or something worse. He released her and stepped back, putting distance between them. Turns out it's worse. What's worse? Marcus turned away, his shoulders rigid. I can't afford this. Can't afford to care about you or want you or any of it. Every person I care about becomes a target. Adrian's dead because someone knew killing him would hurt me. If they figure out you're not just some prisoner I'm babysitting, if they realize you actually matter, they'll come for me. They'll do worse than just kill you. They'll make me watch while they take you apart piece by piece, and then they'll kill you anyway, just to prove they can. His voice was rough with something that sounded like panic. I can't let that happen. Elena's mind was reeling, trying to process everything he'd just admitted. Marcus had wanted her, had watched her, had kept her locked away not just for her protection, but for his own self-control. And now he'd just kissed her like a drowning man grasping for air. So what do we do? She asked. Nothing. This doesn't happen again. Marcus faced her, and his expression had gone cold again, locked down. You go back to your room, I go back to work. We forget this conversation ever happened. Just like that. Just like that. Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. You really think you can just turn it off? Pretend you don't feel whatever this is? I've been pretending since the day I saw you. I can keep pretending. He moved toward the door. Come on, I'll take you back. But Elena didn't move. What if I don't want to pretend? Marcus froze with his hand on the doorknob. Don't. Don't what? Don't admit that I felt something when you kissed me? Don't acknowledge that you're the first person in months who's treated me like I have a brain in my head? Don't make this harder than it has to be. He still wasn't looking at her. You think you want this, but you don't. I'm not Adrian. I'm not kind or gentle or any of the things you deserve. I'm the monster who keeps the other monsters in line, and getting close to me will destroy you. I'm already destroyed. Your brother died in my arms. I'm locked in a house full of people who want me dead. My entire life is gone. What else can you possibly take from me? Your hope. Marcus finally turned to face her, and the raw pain in his eyes made her chest ache. That's what I'll take. The part of you that still believes things can get better. I'll corrupt it, twist it, until you're as dark and damaged as I am, and you'll hate me for it. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because it's what I do. It's what this life does. He opened the door. Now come on, before I change my mind about being noble. Elena crossed the room but stopped at the threshold. You're wrong, you know. About what? Thinking you're a monster. Monsters don't try to protect people from themselves. She walked past him into the hallway before he could respond. Marcus followed silently, keeping a careful distance between them, and Elena felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down like a physical force. When they reached her usual room, Marcus unlocked the door but didn't follow her inside. Just stood in the doorway, looking like he wanted to say something and couldn't find the words. Get some sleep, Elena said quietly. Please. I'll try. Marcus. She turned to face him fully. Thank you for keeping me alive tonight. Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe, like he'd expected anger or accusations, not gratitude. It's my job. No, your job is running this empire. Keeping me alive is a choice. She held his gaze. Thank you for choosing it. He nodded once, sharp and quick, then closed the door between them. The lock clicked, and Elena was alone again. But something had changed. The walls of her prison felt less suffocating, the isolation less complete, because now she knew she wasn't the only one trapped in this situation. Marcus was just as caught as she was, maybe more so, imprisoned by duty and fear and the weight of an empire that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Elena lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Her lips still tingled from his kiss. Her mind still spun from his confession. She should be horrified by all of it, the violence, the obsession, the twisted circumstances that had brought them to this moment. But all she felt was a strange, dangerous sense of possibility. The next morning, everything changed again. A different guard opened her door, Not the usual silent deliveries, but a formal summons. Mr. Vincent Varelli requests your presence in his office. Elena's stomach dropped. Now? Now. She dressed quickly in the plainest clothes she could find and followed the guard through the estate. It was her first time seeing the damage from the previous night's attack in daylight. Bullet holes pocked the walls. Blood stains marked the marble floors despite obvious cleaning attempts. The beautiful facade of the Varelli Empire showed its cracks. Vincent's office was in the oldest part of the house, all dark wood and leather, and the smell of expensive cigars. The patriarch sat behind a massive desk, Marcus standing beside him like a sentinel. Marcus didn't look at her when she entered. His face was a carefully blank mask, and Elena's heart sank. So they were back to pretending. Sit down, Elena, Vincent said, his voice gravelly but not unkind. She sat in the chair across from his desk, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Vincent studied her for a long moment, his pale eyes sharp despite his age. My son tells me you handled yourself well during the attack last night, followed orders, didn't panic. I was terrified, Elena admitted, but you didn't let it paralyze you. That's the important part. He leaned back in his chair. You've been here almost 2 weeks now, long enough to understand how things work, long enough to make a decision. What kind of decision? Whether you're family or whether you're a liability we need to eliminate. Vincent said it casually, like he was discussing the weather instead of her potential murder. Marcus argues you're useful, that your connection to Adrian makes you valuable for appearances. Others in the organization think you're dead weight that'll get us all killed. Elena's mouth went dry. What do you think? I think you're smarter than you let on. I think you've been watching and learning and figuring out how to survive in a world that should have chewed you up and spit you out by now. Vincent pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Which is why I'm giving you a choice. Elena opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were documents, legal papers, financial records, things she didn't immediately understand. Adrian left you everything, Vincent explained. His portion of the family business, his properties, his investments. Legally, you're now one of the wealthiest widows in the country. Elena looked up sharply. I don't understand. It's simple. You can take the money and leave. We'll arrange new identity, relocate you somewhere safe, and you never have to see any of us again. Vincent's expression remained neutral. Or you can stay. Accept your inheritance, take your place in this family, and help us rebuild what Adrian's death broke. Oh, why would you want me to stay? Because despite everything, you're still Adrian's widow. That means something to the old families, the traditional allies. They respect grief, respect the bonds of marriage even in death. Vincent glanced at Marcus, then back to her. And because my son seems to think you're capable of more than just playing the tragic widow. Elena's heart hammered. Marcus still wasn't looking at her, his jaw tight, his hands clenched behind his back. Was this his idea? Or was he being forced to go along with his father's plan? If I stay, Elena said slowly, what would that mean? It means you become a real part of this organization. You learn the business, represent the family at events, help maintain our legitimate fronts. It means you stop being a prisoner and start being an asset. Vincent's eyes hardened. But it also means you're all in. No second thoughts, no running away when things get difficult. Once you're family for life. There's no escape clause. Elena looked at the documents in her lap. Freedom was right there, typed up and notarized. Money, safety, a chance to start over somewhere far from all this blood and violence. But freedom to do what? Return to the life she'd had before, constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next threat? She had no family, no real friends, no support system. The protection Adrian had offered was the only thing that had kept her alive this long. And if she was being honest with herself, some part of her didn't want to leave. Didn't want to walk away from the strange, intense connection she'd felt with Marcus last night. Didn't want to abandon the first place she'd felt like maybe, possibly, she could have actual power instead of just being a victim. How long do I have to decide? She asked. 24 hours. Vincent stood, signaling the meeting was over. Think carefully, Elena. This isn't a decision you can unmake. The guard escorted her back to her room, and Elena spent the rest of the day staring at those documents, her mind churning through every possible angle. She could leave, take the money and disappear. build a quiet life somewhere safe. Or she could stay. Claim her place in this dangerous, violent world. Stand beside the man who'd admitted he wanted her while fighting to protect what his brother had left behind. Freedom or power. Safety or purpose. Running or fighting. When Marcus came to her room that night, she already knew her answer. He didn't knock, just used his key and walked in like he owned the room, which he did. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, the document still spread across the comforter, and watched him close the door behind him. Marcus looked worse than he had the night before. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements stiff with pain he was trying to hide. He'd changed clothes, but there was still blood under his fingernails. "Have you decided?" he asked without preamble. Elena picked up the papers and held them out. "I'm staying." Marcus stared at the documents like they might bite him. "You should take the money and run." "I don't want to run anymore." "Elena, I'm staying," she repeated, her voice firmer. "I'm accepting Adrian's inheritance and my place in this family. I'm done being locked in rooms and treated like a problem to solve." Marcus took the papers from her hand and set them on the dresser. "Do you understand what you're agreeing to? This isn't some business arrangement you can walk away from when it gets hard. You're signing your life over to this family." "I already did that when I married Adrian." Elena stood to face him. "The only difference is now I'm choosing it instead of having it forced on me. You're choosing a target on your back. You're choosing to live every day knowing someone might put a bullet in your head just to hurt us. You're choosing to have power instead of being powerless." She stepped closer. "You asked me last night what you could possibly take from me. Well, I'm taking something back. Control, agency. The ability to decide my own fate instead of waiting for men to decide it for me." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Respect, maybe, or concern. "You think staying here gives you control?" "More than running does. Out there, I'm alone, hunted, vulnerable. Here, I'm a Virelli. That name means something. I can use it. Or it'll get you killed." "Everything gets you killed eventually." Elena held his gaze. "At least this way, I'll die fighting instead of hiding." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was trying to find the lie, the weakness, the breaking point. "You're serious about this?" "Completely." "Then you need to understand the rules." He moved to the window, putting distance between them like proximity made thinking difficult. "You're not Adrian's widow anymore. You're a member of this organization. That means you answer to Vincent, to me, to the family structure. You do what you're told when you're told to do it. You don't question orders in front of others. You don't make decisions that affect the family without approval. And you sure as hell don't betray us, because if you do, I'll kill you myself." The threat should have scared her. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing he'd said all day. "Understood," Elena said. "You'll be assigned legitimate business responsibilities. Adrian was developing a real estate portfolio. You'll take that over. Learn the properties, the tenants, the money flow. Make it look clean, while you handle the parts that aren't clean." Marcus's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Exactly. What about my living situation?" "You'll move to the family wing. Real room, not a cell. But there'll still be security. You don't go anywhere without approval and escort until we're sure the threat level has decreased. So, still a prisoner, just a nicer cage. Think of it as protective custody." Marcus turned from the window. "There's something else you need to know. The kiss last night was a mistake, you said. Was complicated." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "I meant what I said. About watching you, wanting you. That doesn't just go away because it's inconvenient." Elena's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to establish boundaries. You're family now, which makes this even more impossible than it already was. Vincent can't know. Nobody can know. If they suspect there's something between us, you become a weakness they'll exploit. So we pretend nothing happened. We pretend nothing's happening." Marcus's eyes locked with hers. "Because nothing can happen. Not while you're under my protection. Not while the family's in crisis. Not while every enemy we have is looking for leverage." Elena crossed the room until she was standing directly in front of him. "And when the crisis is over? When the enemies are dealt with? What then?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we'll see." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I've got." His hand lifted like he wanted to touch her, then dropped. I can't promise you anything except that I'll keep you alive. Everything else is uncertain. I'm not asking for promises. Elena reached out and took his hand, pressing it to her cheek the way she had the night before. I'm asking for honesty. Do you want me to stay? Marcus's breath caught. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and Elena saw the war happening behind his eyes. Duty versus desire, logic versus emotion, everything he'd been trained to be versus everything he actually felt. Yes, he finally said, the word rough and reluctant. I want you to stay, even though I shouldn't, even though it's selfish and dangerous and probably going to destroy us both. Elena turned her head and pressed a kiss to his palm. Then I'm staying. Marcus pulled her against him hard enough to hurt, his arms tight around her, his face buried in her hair. They stood like that for a long moment, two people caught in an impossible situation, clinging to each other because there was nothing else solid to hold on to. Then Marcus pulled back, his expression shuddering. Pack whatever you want to keep. Someone will move you to your new room in the morning. Where will you be? Working, always working. He moved toward the door, then paused. Elena, this doesn't change anything. We still can't. I know. She did know. Understood the impossible position they were in, but understanding didn't make it easier. I'll see you tomorrow. He left without another word, and Elena was alone with her decision. The new room was 3 times the size of her prison, with actual windows that opened and a bathroom that didn't feel like a cell. Someone had already moved her meager belongings, the few clothes that had been provided, the books she'd read to pass the time. It looked pathetic, spread across the expensive furniture. Maria appeared in the doorway, the same elderly woman who'd helped her dress for the wedding. Miss Elena, I've been assigned to assist you. Assist me with what? Whatever you need. Wardrobe, schedule, learning the household routines. Maria's expression was kind but cautious. Mr. Vincent wants you to feel welcome. Elena almost laughed. Welcome. In a house where half the people wanted her dead and the other half saw her as a useful pawn. I need clothes, she said instead. Real clothes, not just morning dresses. Something I can work in. Of course. I'll arrange for a tailor to come tomorrow. Maria hesitated. If I may say, miss, it's good to see you out of that room. Mr. Adrian would have wanted you to have freedom. The mention of Adrian hit harder than Elena expected. She'd been so focused on surviving, on the strange thing developing between her and Marcus, that she'd almost forgotten the man who'd brought her here in the first place. Did you know him well? Elena asked. I've worked for this family for 30 years, watched both boys grow up. Maria's eyes went distant with memory. Mr. Adrian was always the gentle one. Tried to see the good in people, even when there wasn't any good to see. Mr. Marcus was different, harder, but he loved his brother more than anything. He doesn't act like it. Mr. Marcus doesn't know how to show what he feels. His father raised him to be strong, to never show weakness. Emotions are weakness in this world. Maria moved to the window and drew back the curtains, letting in afternoon light. But I've seen how he looks at you. Same way he used to look at things he wanted but knew he couldn't have. Elena's heart stuttered. What do you mean? Nothing, miss. Just an old woman's observations. Maria smiled slightly. Dinner is at 7. You're expected to join the family in the main dining room. I'll come fetch you. When Maria left, Elena explored her new space properly. The closet was enormous and mostly empty, waiting for the wardrobe Maria had promised. The bathroom had a tub big enough to drown in. The bed was massive, covered in expensive linens that probably cost more than she used to make in a month. This was her life now. Luxury and danger wrapped together so tightly she couldn't separate them. Dinner was an exercise in tension. The main dining room could have seated 30, but only 5 places were set. Vincent at the head of the table, Marcus to his right, Elena to his left. 2 other men she didn't recognize filled out the remaining seats. Elena, this is James Caruso and Michael Romano, Vincent introduced them. They handle our financial and legal operations respectively. Both men nodded to her with expressions that gave away nothing. Evaluating her, measuring her worth, deciding if she was an asset or a liability. Gentlemen, Elena said quietly. The meal was served by silent staff who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Nobody spoke during the first course. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the clink of silverware on china. Finally, Vincent cleared his throat. Elena has decided to accept her inheritance and take over Adrian's real estate portfolio. Is that wise? Caruso asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. Given the current instability? It's necessary, Marcus said before Vincent could answer. We need continuity, especially in our legitimate operations. Elena is Adrian's legal heir. The properties transfer to her anyway. Better to have her actively managing them than letting them sit dormant. What does she know about real estate development? Romano's question was barely polite. Elena set down her fork carefully. Nothing, which is why I'll be learning. I assume that's why there are accountants and lawyers, to help people who don't know what they're doing. Romano's eyebrows rose slightly. Vincent actually smiled. She's not wrong, Vincent said. Adrian didn't know anything about real estate when he started either. He learned. She will too. With respect, sir, Adrian was family. She's also family, Marcus interrupted, his voice cold enough to frost the room. She's a Varelli now. That's the end of the discussion. Romano shut up, but his expression said he wasn't happy about it. The rest of the dinner passed with business talk Elena barely understood. Names of properties, zoning issues, development timelines, profit margins. She listened and tried to piece together the puzzle of Adrian's work. After the meal, Marcus caught her elbow as she was leaving. My office. 10 minutes. He walked away before she could respond. Elena found her way to his office, the same one where he'd kissed her, where fires had burned in the distance while they'd torn down walls between them. Now it looked different in the lamplight, less a battlefield and more just a workspace. Marcus was already there, paper spread across his desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't look up when she entered. Close the door. Elena did, and the click of the latch felt significant somehow. Marcus finally looked at her. Caruso and Romano don't trust you. They think you're a gold digger who manipulated Adrian and now you're trying to worm your way into the organization. Are they wrong? About the manipulation? Yes. About the gold digging? He shrugged. Doesn't matter. What matters is they're going to test you. Push back on every decision, question every move, try to prove you're incompetent so they can convince Vincent to remove you. What should I do? Learn faster than they expect. Make smart decisions. Don't let them intimidate you. Marcus took a drink. And don't trust anyone except me and Vincent. Everyone else in this organization would sell you out for the right price. Elena moved closer to the desk, including you. I'd sell you out for free if it meant protecting this family. His eyes met hers. But I'd hate myself for it if that helps. It doesn't. Didn't think so. Marcus pushed a folder across the desk. Adrian's properties. 12 buildings across the city. Apartments, commercial space, 1 hotel. Combined value of about $40 million. Current monthly revenue, expenses, and tenant information are all in there. You have 1 week to review everything and present a management plan to Vincent. Elena picked up the folder with shaking hands. 1 week? Welcome to the family business. We don't do second chances. He poured another drink and offered her the glass. You'll need this. She took it and sat down in the chair across from him. The whiskey burned but helped with the panic rising in her chest. $40 million in property. A week to learn everything. Men who wanted her to fail. And Marcus, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted. Yes, you do. Or you wouldn't have stayed. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You're scared, which is smart. But you're also angry, which is useful. Use that anger. Let it fuel you. Show Caruso and Romano that underestimating you was a mistake. How? By being better than they expect. By working harder. By proving you're not just Adrian's widow playing house, you're a Varelli with everything that means. He paused. And by coming to me when you need help. I won't hold your hand, but I'll make sure you have the information you need. Elena stared at the folder in her lap. A week. 1 week to prove herself or be dismissed as useless. She'd survived worse odds. Okay, she said. I'll do it. I know you will. Marcus's expression softened slightly. You should go. It's late, and you need to start reading. Elena stood but didn't leave. Marcus, thank you. For what? For believing I can do this, even if you won't say it directly. Something flickered across his face. If I didn't believe it, I would have told Vincent to send you away with the money. Now go before I change my mind about keeping my distance. Elena left before he could see how much those words affected her. The next 5 days were hell. Elena barely slept, reading through tenant agreements and financial reports until her eyes blurred. Maria brought her meals she barely touched, coffee she drank by the gallon, and worried looks Elena ignored. She learned that Adrian had been smarter than anyone gave him credit for. His properties were strategically placed in neighborhoods on the verge of gentrification. The hotel was a gold mine of legitimate revenue. The commercial spaces were rented to businesses that provided perfect cover for money laundering without actually being illegal. But there were also problems. A residential building with a tenant organizing against rent increases. A commercial property with structural issues that needed expensive repairs. The hotel hemorrhaging money from poor management. Elena made notes, drew diagrams, created spreadsheets that would have made her father proud. And slowly, a plan took shape. On the 6th day, Marcus appeared in her room unannounced. Elena looked up from her laptop, vision swimming from too many hours staring at numbers. "You look terrible," he said. "Thanks. You're not exactly fresh yourself." It was true. Marcus had dark circles under his eyes and moved like every muscle hurt. He sat down in the chair across from her makeshift desk. "Show me what you have." Elena turned the laptop around and walked him through her analysis. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, silence stretched between them. "Well?" Elena prompted. "The residential building. You're planning to meet with the tenant organizer instead of evicting them." "Yes, they have legitimate complaints about maintenance. If I fix the issues and negotiate reasonable rent increases, instead of the aggressive jumps Adrian had scheduled, I remove their cause for organizing and improve tenant retention. It'll cost money up front, but save money long-term in legal fees and vacancy costs." Elena met his gaze. "Plus it makes us look reasonable, which is good for the family's image." Marcus was quiet for another moment. Then he smiled, and it transformed his face. "Vincent is going to love you." Relief flooded through her. "Really?" "Really. This is smart, pragmatic, and shows you actually understand the business instead of just pushing numbers around." He stood. "Present it exactly like this tomorrow. Don't let Caruso rattle you when he questions the costs. Stand your ground." "Will you be there?" "Yes, but I won't defend you. You need to do that yourself." Marcus moved toward the door, then stopped. "Elena, I'm impressed. I didn't think you'd actually pull this off." "You told me to prove myself. I'm proving myself." "You're doing more than that." His eyes held hers. "You're showing them that you belong here. That you're not just Adrian's widow or some scared girl playing at business. You're showing them that you're dangerous in your own right." The word should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like the highest compliment he could give. The presentation the next morning was brutal. Caruso questioned every number. Romano poked holes in her reasoning. Vincent sat silently, watching the exchange like it was theater performed for his benefit. Marcus stood against the wall, his expression neutral, offering no help. Elena held her ground, defended her decisions, explained her logic, and when Caruso suggested she was being too soft on the tenants, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "Adrian built this portfolio to be profitable and sustainable. Squeezing tenants until they break doesn't accomplish either goal. My plan does." Silence fell over the room. Then Vincent laughed, a rough sound that seemed to surprise even him. "She's got spine. I'll give her that." "The numbers are solid," Marcus said, speaking for the first time. "The approach is sound. I recommend we approve the plan and give Elena full authority over the portfolio." Caruso opened his mouth to object, but Vincent cut him off with a gesture. "Approved. Elena, you'll report progress to me weekly. Any major decisions still require consultation with Marcus or myself. But day-to-day management is yours." Elena's hands were shaking under the table, but her voice stayed steady. "Thank you." The meeting adjourned. As people filed out, Marcus caught her eye across the room. The pride in his expression made her chest tight. She'd done it, proved herself, earned her place. Now came the hard part, keeping it. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena threw herself into the work. She met with property managers, toured buildings, sat in on tenant meetings. The residential organizer turned out to be a woman named Sarah, who was fighting for her neighbors because nobody else would. Elena listened, negotiated, and found solutions that worked for everyone. The hotel was harder. The manager was skimming profits and had ties to a rival family. Elena brought the evidence to Marcus, who handled it personally. The manager disappeared. A new one was installed. Revenue improved immediately. Word spread through the organization. Adrian's widow wasn't just a figurehead. She was actually competent. It should have made things easier. Instead, it made them more complicated. Marcus started avoiding her. Their interactions became strictly professional. Brief updates, necessary approvals, nothing personal. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Wouldn't be alone with her if he could help it. Elena told herself she understood. Told herself it was necessary for both their safety. But it hurt anyway. This deliberate distance after the intensity of what had passed between them. 3 weeks after her presentation, Elena was leaving the hotel after a management meeting when a car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a man she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Virelli, my employer would like to speak with you." Elena's security detail immediately surrounded her, guns appearing from nowhere. But the man just smiled. "No need for drama, just a conversation. My employer has information about the attack on your wedding. Thought you might be interested." Elena's pulse spiked. "Tell your employer to go through proper channels." "Proper channels are compromised. That's the information." The man handed a card through the window. "Tomorrow night. The address is on the card. Come alone if you want the truth about who killed Adrian." The car drove away before Elena could respond. Her head of security grabbed the card. "We need to report this to Mr. Marcus immediately." But Elena's mind was racing. Information about Adrian's death, about the traitor in their organization. This could be a trap, or it could be the break they needed. She took the card back. "Let me think about it first." That night, Marcus stormed into her room without knocking. "What the hell were you thinking?" He slammed a report down on her desk. "The security details account of the incident. Someone approaches you on the street offering information and you don't immediately report it?" Elena stood to face him. "I was going to tell you." "When? After you'd already gone to this mysterious meeting alone and gotten yourself killed?" "I'm not stupid enough to go alone. You're apparently stupid enough to consider going at all." Marcus was angrier than she'd ever seen him. "This is exactly the kind of trap I warned you about. Someone offers you something you want. Information, answers, closure, and you walk right into an ambush. Or it's real. Or it's someone who actually knows something about who betrayed us." Elena grabbed the card from her desk. "You've been hunting for weeks and found nothing. Maybe this is the break we need." "It's not a break, it's bait." Marcus snatched the card from her hand. "And you're not taking it. You don't get to order me around about this. If there's information about Adrian's death, then I'll get it, not you." His jaw was tight. "You're not risking your life on some vague promise from a stranger." "Why not? You risk your life every day." "That's different." "How?" Elena stepped closer, anger overriding caution. "Because you're trained for it? Because you're the big, tough enforcer, and I'm just the widow playing at business? Because I can afford to die." The words exploded out of him, raw and desperate. "My death doesn't matter. The organization moves on. Vincent finds another enforcer. Life continues. But if you die..." He cut himself off, breathing hard. "If I die, what?" Elena pushed. "The real estate portfolio gets reassigned? The family finds another acceptable face to put forward? What, Marcus?" "If you die, I don't know what I do," he said quietly, and the admission seemed to cost him something. "And that's exactly why you can't go to this meeting. Because I'm already compromised. Already making decisions based on keeping you safe instead of what's strategically sound. And that's going to get both of us killed." The fight drained out of Elena as quickly as it had risen. "I'm sorry. I should have told you right away." Marcus slumped against the wall. "I know you want answers about Adrian, but this isn't the way to get them." "Then what is?" "Let me handle it. I'll send people to scout the location, check for traps. If it's legitimate, we'll set up a meeting with proper security." He looked at her finally, and the exhaustion in his eyes was crushing. "Just promise me you won't do anything reckless." "I promise." Marcus nodded and turned to leave. "Wait," Elena said. "You've been avoiding me." His hand froze on the doorknob. "I've been busy." "You've been avoiding me," she repeated. "Ever since the presentation. Was it something I did?" "You've been perfect. That's the problem." Marcus faced her again. "You're not supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to be a liability I'm managing, a problem I'm solving. But instead you're proving yourself indispensable, and everyone sees it, and that makes you an even bigger target. So you're protecting me by pretending I don't exist? I'm protecting both of us by maintaining appropriate distance. But his eyes told a different story, full of want and frustration and the same desperate need Elena felt. She crossed the room until they were inches apart. What if I don't want appropriate distance? Elena, what if I want exactly the inappropriate thing we're both trying to avoid? Marcus's control was cracking. She could see it in the tension of his jaw, the way his hands clenched into fists. You don't know what you're asking for. Yes, I do. I'm asking for honesty. I'm asking for you to stop treating me like I'm fragile. I'm asking... He kissed her. It was different from the first time, less desperate, more deliberate. His hands came up to frame her face gently, his thumb stroking her cheek as his mouth moved against hers with devastating precision. Elena melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. This was what she'd been craving for weeks, this connection, this proof that she wasn't alone in this impossible situation. Marcus pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against hers. This is such a bad idea. Terrible, Elena agreed. We shouldn't. Probably not. Elena. Her name was a question and a prayer and a surrender, all at once. She pulled him down and kissed him again, and this time he didn't pull away. They broke apart when someone knocked on the door. Marcus stepped back instantly, his expression shuddering into the cold mask Elena had come to recognize as his default armor. He straightened his shirt and moved to the window like nothing had happened. Come in, Elena called, her voice steadier than she felt. Maria entered with a tray. Dinner, miss. I thought you might want it in your room since you've been working so hard. Thank you, Maria. The older woman set down the tray, her eyes moving between Elena and Marcus with knowing speculation. Mr. Marcus, will you be staying? No, I was just leaving. He didn't look at Elena. We'll discuss the security concerns tomorrow. He left without another word, and Elena wanted to throw something at the closed door. Maria began arranging the food on the small table. He's fighting it very hard, you know. Elena froze. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Maria's smile was gentle. But if you did, you should know that Mr. Marcus has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you. Not in all the years I've known him. Maria, I'm old. I see things. I also know how to keep my mouth shut. She moved toward the door. Just be careful, miss. The people in this house notice everything, and not all of them wish you well. When Maria left, Elena sat at the table and stared at food she couldn't eat. Her lips still tingled from Marcus's kiss. Her mind raced with everything unsaid between them. This was impossible. Dangerous. Exactly the kind of complication that got people killed in this world. But it was also real, this thing between them. The only real thing in a life that had become nothing but performance and calculation. Elena picked at her food and tried to figure out how to survive wanting something she absolutely could not have. The next morning, Marcus sent a team to scout the meeting location from the mysterious card. They found it was a legitimate office building in the financial district, not some abandoned warehouse perfect for an ambush. The company listed at that address was a private security firm with no obvious connections to any crime families. It could still be a trap, Marcus said during the briefing. But it's a more sophisticated one than usual. So what do we do? Elena asked. Vincent looked up from the report. We go. But carefully. Marcus will attend the meeting with full security. You stay here. They asked for me specifically, which is exactly why you're not going. Vincent's tone left no room for argument. If they have real information, they'll share it regardless of whether you're in the room. If it's a trap, better to spring it without giving them their primary target. Elena wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. Fine, but I want to know everything they say. You will, Marcus promised. That night, Elena paced her room like a caged animal while Marcus was at the meeting. She imagined every possible scenario: ambush, assassination, betrayal. Every noise in the hallway made her jump. When Marcus finally returned, it was well past midnight. He found her in the sitting room, still dressed, unable to even pretend to sleep. Well? She demanded. Marcus poured himself a drink before answering. It was legitimate. Sort of. What does that mean? The man who wanted to meet represents a faction within our own organization. People who were loyal to Adrian and aren't happy with how things have been handled since his death. Elena's stomach dropped. They're planning a coup. No, they're offering information in exchange for consideration. Marcus took a long drink. They know who the traitor is? The person who gave intel to Chen's people about the wedding. Who? Michael Romano, the lawyer. The man who'd questioned Elena's competence at her very first family dinner. She should have been shocked, but somehow it made perfect sense. Why? She asked. Money. Adrian was planning to restructure some of the family's legal arrangements in a way that would have cost Romano his position. So Romano reached out to Chen, offered to help eliminate Adrian in exchange for a place in Chen's organization. Marcus's expression was ice cold. Chen's dead now, but Romano's still here. Still in our inner circle. Still feeding information to whoever will pay. What are you going to do? What needs to be done? Marcus set down his glass. But that's not all. These people, Adrian's loyalists, they want something in return for this information. What? Marcus met her eyes. They want you to have a real voice in the organization. Want Vincent to formally recognize you as Adrian's successor in more than just the real estate portfolio. They think the family needs someone like Adrian's vision, and they believe you might be able to provide it. Elena sank into a chair. They don't even know me. They know you've been making smart decisions. They know you negotiated with that tenant organizer instead of just crushing her. They know you're trying to run legitimate businesses legitimately. Marcus moved closer. They think you might be able to steer this family towards something less violent. That's insane. I have no power here. You have more than you think. Vincent respects you. I respect you. Even Caruso has grudgingly admitted you know what you're doing. Marcus crouched in front of her chair. These people are offering you a coalition, support from inside the organization. In exchange, they want you to push for reforms, legitimate business, less reliance on the criminal enterprises. What do you think I should do? I think you should be very careful. This could be an opportunity or it could be a different kind of trap. His hand covered hers. But if you want it, if you want actual power instead of just managing properties, this is how you get it. You build alliances. You make yourself indispensable to enough people that removing you becomes impossible. Elena's mind raced through the implications. And Romano? Will be dealt with tomorrow night. Vincent wants it done publicly as a message to anyone else thinking about betrayal. Marcus's voice was flat. You don't need to be there for that part. I want to be. He pulled back. Elena, if I'm going to have power in this organization, I need to understand all aspects of it, including the ugly parts. She held his gaze. I need to see what justice looks like in this world. Marcus studied her face for a long moment. You might not like what you see. I probably won't, but I need to see it anyway. The next night, the family gathered in one of the estate's private meeting rooms. Not the formal dining room or Vincent's office, but a space Elena had never seen before. Windowless, soundproofed, with a single chair bolted to the floor in the center. Romano was brought in by 2 guards. He tried to maintain his composure, but Elena could see the fear in his eyes when he saw Vincent waiting. Michael, Vincent's voice was almost gentle. You've been with this family for 12 years, handled our legal affairs with competence and discretion. I trusted you. Sir, I don't know what you've been told. Don't. The gentleness vanished. We have testimony from 4 separate sources. We have financial records showing payments from Chen's organization. We have phone records, emails, everything we need. Romano's face went gray. It wasn't personal. Adrian was going to destroy everything we'd built. Adrian was going to make us legitimate. There's a difference. Vincent nodded to Marcus. Marcus stepped forward with a gun, and Elena's stomach turned. She'd asked to be here, wanted to understand this world, but actually watching it was different than imagining it. Wait! Elena's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned to look at her. Marcus's eyes held a warning. He should answer for Adrian's death publicly, Elena continued, her voice stronger than she felt. The families who've been circling, waiting for weakness, they need to see that traitors are found and punished, that we're not vulnerable. Vincent considered this. You want a spectacle. I want a message sent that's loud enough everyone hears it. Romano started struggling against his restraints. You can't. This is murder. This is justice. Vincent's smile was cold. And the girl's right. We should make sure everyone understands what happens to traitors. Marcus, arrange a gathering. 3 days from now. Invite the other families, the major players. Let them watch. Marcus holstered his gun. Consider it done. Romano was dragged away, still protesting. The room emptied until only Elena, Marcus, and Vincent remained. That was well played, Vincent said to Elena. Practical and strategic. Adrian would have been too soft for this, but you understand what needs to be done. Elena felt sick, but she kept her expression neutral. I understand that strength is the only language this world respects. Good. Then you'll understand what I'm about to offer you. Vincent sat down heavily. I'm old, Elena. This business ages you faster than normal life. I have maybe 5 years left where I can effectively run this organization. Adrian was supposed to take over with Marcus as his enforcer. But Adrian's gone, and Marcus, he looked at his surviving son. Marcus is brilliant at what he does, but he's not built to be the public face of this family. He's the monster in the shadows, not the king in the light. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I'm offering you a position, Vincent continued. Real authority. You continue building the legitimate businesses, representing the family publicly, making the connections we need in straight society. Marcus handles security and the operations we can't make legitimate. Together, you transition this family into something that can survive beyond my generation. Elena's heart hammered. You want me to be Adrian's replacement? I want you to be better than Adrian. He had vision but lacked ruthlessness. You seem to have both. Vincent stood. Think about it. But don't think too long. The vultures are circling, and we need to show them we have a future. He left, and Elena was alone with Marcus. You engineered this, she said quietly. The meeting with Adrian's loyalists, this conversation with Vincent, you've been positioning me for this. Marcus didn't deny it. I told you weeks ago that you were dangerous in your own right. I meant it. You have the skills we need, the ability to think strategically, to appear sympathetic while being ruthless, to build bridges Adrian couldn't build because people knew he was too soft. And what do you get out of this? I get to do what I'm good at without having to pretend to be something I'm not. He moved closer. I get to keep you here, alive, where I can protect you instead of watching you leave with Vincent's money and wondering when someone will kill you to hurt us. That's not the only reason. No. Marcus's hand came up to cup her face. I get to work beside you, build something with you. Maybe find a way to make this thing between us actually work instead of just fighting it constantly. Elena leaned into his touch. This is insane. Your brother died a month ago. I barely know how to run a real estate portfolio, much less help lead a crime family, and she gestured between them. This is so complicated it shouldn't even exist. I know. People will talk. They'll say I manipulated my way into power, that I'm using you, that let them talk. Marcus's thumb traced her lower lip. The only opinions that matter are Vincent's, and he already approves. Everyone else will fall in line or leave. That's how this works. And what are we? Elena asked. If I do this, if I take this position, what happens between us? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. We're careful. Discreet. We don't give anyone ammunition to use against us, but we stop pretending we don't want each other. That's not much of an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. His forehead pressed against hers. I can't promise you romance or normalcy or any of the things you deserve, but I can promise I'll stand beside you, protect you, help you build whatever version of this family you want to create. And if I want to dismantle it entirely, transition everything to legitimate businesses, and walk away from the criminal empire, then I'll help you do that too, even if it means destroying everything my father built. His eyes were serious. You asked me once what happens when the crisis is over. This is my answer. Whatever you want to build, whatever direction you want to take this family, I'm with you. Elena pulled him down and kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. Fear and want and determination and the strange, fierce connection that had grown between them in the worst possible circumstances. When they broke apart, Marcus rested his cheek against her hair. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Elena pulled back to look at him properly. I need to know what happened to Romano is what I want. I need to see if I can actually stomach this world before I commit to leading it. Fair enough. Marcus kissed her forehead. 3 days, then you'll know. The gathering was held in a warehouse the Virelli family owned near the docks. Neutral territory where the other families would feel safe enough to attend, but isolated enough that security could be maintained. Elena dressed carefully for it. Black suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back severely. She looked like she was attending a funeral. In a way, she was. The warehouse had been set up like a theater, chairs arranged in rows, all facing a raised platform where Romano knelt with his hands bound. Representatives from every major family in the city sat in those chairs, watching with varying degrees of interest and calculation. Elena sat in the front row between Vincent and Marcus. Her hands were folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Vincent stood and addressed the crowd. You all know why we're here. Michael Romano betrayed this family, sold information that led to my son's death. In this business, there's only one punishment for betrayal. Romano tried to speak, but a guard silenced him. But before we proceed, Vincent continued, I want to introduce someone. Elena Virelli, Adrian's widow. She's taken over his business operations and proven herself invaluable to this organization. She'll be representing the family in all legitimate ventures going forward. The other families murmured. Elena could feel their eyes on her, assessing, calculating her worth and threat level. Stand up, Marcus murmured beside her. Elena stood, facing the assembled criminals and corrupt businessmen who made up this world's power structure. She met their stares without flinching. Mrs. Virelli wanted this gathering, Vincent said. Wanted everyone to see what happens to traitors in our family. Wanted to send a message that we're stronger now than before the attack, that we've adapted and evolved. He nodded to Marcus. Marcus stood and walked to the platform, drew his gun. Romano started begging, his words muffled by the guard's hand. Elena watched without looking away. This was the reality of the power she was being offered. The blood that would be on her hands, directly or indirectly, if she accepted Vincent's proposal. The gunshot was loud in the enclosed space. Romano slumped forward, dead before he hit the ground. Nobody in the audience reacted with more than mild interest. This was just business to them. Marcus walked back to his seat like he'd just completed a routine task. His expression was empty, that cold mask firmly in place. Vincent addressed the crowd again. Anyone else thinking about betrayal should remember this moment. The Virelli family protects its own and destroys its enemies. Nothing has changed except we're stronger now, more unified. The gathering dispersed quickly after that. Representatives from other families approached Vincent to pay respects and reaffirm alliances. A few approached Elena, offering condolences about Adrian that felt performative but were politically necessary. She smiled and accepted their words and felt nothing except a strange, hollow certainty. This was her world now. Blood and business and calculated violence wrapped in expensive suits and polite words. Back at the estate, Marcus found her in her room, staring out the window at the dark grounds. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know. Elena turned to face him. I watched you kill a man tonight. Watched it happen because I suggested it. And I don't feel anything except relief that the traitor is gone. That makes you practical, not a monster. Does it? She laughed bitterly. A month ago, I would have been horrified, would have run screaming from all of this. Now I'm calculating how to use it to consolidate power. What does that make me? Marcus crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. It makes you a survivor, someone who adapts instead of breaking, someone strong enough to exist in this world without losing themselves completely. How do you know I haven't already lost myself? Because you're still asking the question. He tilted her face up. The day you stop wondering if you've gone too far is the day you actually have. But you're not there yet. Elena wanted to believe him. Wanted to think she could navigate this world without becoming the kind of person who ordered executions without flinching, but she'd already made her decision, even if she hadn't said it out loud yet. I'm accepting Vincent's offer, she said. I'm going to help lead this family. Marcus's arms tightened around her. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She pulled back to look at him. On one condition. What condition? We do this together. Not you in the shadows and me in the light with no communication. We're partners in this. Real partners. You don't make major decisions without consulting me, and I don't make them without consulting you. Elena, I mean it. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to commit to this life, I need to know you're actually with me. Not just protecting me or using me, but genuinely working beside me. Marcus studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Partners. I can do that. Even when I want to take the family in directions you don't agree with? Even then. I'll argue with you, but I'll follow your lead. His smile was slight. You're better at the big picture strategy than I am anyway. And the other thing? Between us? Marcus pulled her closer, his hands settling on her waist. The other thing is complicated and probably going to get us both in trouble, but I'm done pretending I don't want it. Want you. We'll have to be careful. I know. People will talk. Let them. Marcus kissed her, slow and thorough. I've spent my entire life doing what was expected, being what the family needed. For once, I'm choosing something I actually want. Elena kissed him back, feeling some of the tension that had been coiled in her chest for weeks finally release. This was still dangerous, still complicated, still probably a terrible idea. But it was real, and right now that mattered more than anything else. They broke apart when someone knocked on the door. Miss Elena? Maria's voice called. Mr. Vincent would like to see you in his office. Marcus stepped back, his expression shifting back to neutral. I'll come with you. Vincent's office was thick with cigar smoke when they arrived. The old man looked tired but satisfied. Sit, he said. Elena sat. Marcus stood behind her chair, a silent presence of support. The other families responded well to tonight's display, Vincent began. You made an impression. Several of them asked about your role going forward. I told them you're being groomed to take over the legitimate operations with the possibility of more. And? Elena asked. And they're curious but not hostile. That's as good as it gets in this business. Vincent poured 3 glasses of whiskey and passed them out. I'm making it official. You're now a full partner in the family business. You'll have access to all financial records, attend all major meetings, and your vote carries the same weight as Marcus's. Elena accepted the glass with shaking hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This position comes with responsibilities. You're now a target. People will try to kill you, corrupt you, or use you against us. Every decision you make reflects on the entire family. I understand. Vincent raised his glass. To the future of the Varelli family. May we survive it. They drank, and Elena felt the whiskey burn all the way down. Over the next 3 months, Elena learned the full scope of what she'd agreed to. The legitimate businesses were just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath them ran operations that ranged from morally gray to outright criminal, money laundering, protection rackets, smuggling. Elena couldn't change it all overnight, but she started making strategic shifts, pushing resources toward legitimate ventures that could eventually replace the criminal income, building relationships with politicians and business people who could help transition the family toward respectability. It was slow work, frustrating work, but she was actually doing it. Adrian's loyalists, the faction that had provided information about Romano, became her core support. They helped her navigate internal politics, warned her about potential threats, and backed her initiatives even when they were controversial. Marcus kept his promise to be a true partner. They argued sometimes, loudly and intensely, about strategy and priorities, but they always worked it out, finding compromises that satisfied both the need for security and the push toward legitimacy. And in private, behind locked doors and away from the watching eyes of the organization, they built something that felt almost like a relationship. Stolen hours in Marcus's office after everyone else had gone to bed. Quiet mornings in Elena's room before the day's chaos began. Careful touches in hallways when nobody was looking. It wasn't normal. Would never be normal. But it was theirs. 6 months after Adrian's death, Vincent called another family meeting. I'm stepping back, he announced without preamble. My health isn't what it was. I'm turning over day-to-day operations to Elena and Marcus. They'll run this organization together, Elena handling legitimate business and external relations, Marcus handling security and internal operations. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some people nodded approvingly, others looked skeptical, but nobody openly objected. Vincent's word was still law. Questions? Vincent asked. Caruso raised his hand. What happens if they disagree on something major? Who has final say? Vincent looked at Elena and Marcus. You two work that out. I'm not going to micromanage from retirement. After the meeting, Elena found Marcus in the armory, cleaning weapons with methodical precision. We're actually doing this, she said. Apparently. He didn't look up from the gun in his hands. Are you okay with it? Marcus set down the gun and looked at her properly. Are you? I asked first. He smiled slightly. I'm terrified. You've been here 6 months and you're basically running half the family's operations. I've been here my entire life and I've never had this much responsibility. We'll figure it out together. Will we? Marcus stood and crossed to where she stood. Because sooner or later, we're going to disagree on something fundamental, something where there's no compromise. What happens then? Elena had thought about this, had lost sleep over it. Then we argue until we find a solution we can both live with. That's what partners do. And if we can't, then we flip a coin. She was only half joking. Or we alternate who gets final say. Or we bring in a mediator. There are solutions that don't involve destroying what we've built. Marcus pulled her close. You're really committed to this. To us. I'm committed to building something better than what came before. Whether that's us or just a business partnership, we'll figure out as we go. Elena looked up at him. Are you committed? To you? Yes. To this insane plan to reform a criminal empire from the inside? Also yes, apparently. He kissed her forehead. I must be out of my mind. Probably. Elena smiled against his chest. But we're out of our minds together. The next year was brutal. 2 more assassination attempts, both thwarted by Marcus's security measures. 3 hostile takeover bids from rival families, all fought off through a combination of Elena's strategic alliances and Marcus's brutal efficiency. 1 FBI investigation that came dangerously close to indicting key members before Elena's legal team found procedural violations that forced it to shut down. But they survived. More than survived. They actually started to thrive. The real estate portfolio expanded. Elena bought 3 more hotels and a small chain of restaurants, all running legitimately and profitably. The revenue they generated allowed her to shut down 2 protection rackets and 1 smuggling operation, transitioning the resources to legal ventures. It wasn't fast enough for some people. Adrian's old supporters pushed for more dramatic reforms. But it was faster than the old guard wanted. Several longtime members left the organization rather than adapt. Marcus supported her through all of it, backed her decisions publicly, offered brutal honesty privately about what was and wasn't realistic. He dealt with the people who needed to be dealt with while she built the bridges that would carry them into legitimacy. They learned each other's rhythms, strengths, and weaknesses. Learned when to push and when to compromise. Learned how to fight without destroying each other and how to support without enabling. And somewhere in the process, the careful distance they'd maintained began to collapse. It started small. Marcus's hand lingering on her back during meetings. Elena touching his arm when she wanted his attention. Looks that lasted too long, smiles that meant too much. Then one night, after a particularly brutal negotiation with a rival family, Marcus followed Elena back to her room and didn't leave. They didn't talk about it the next morning, didn't define what it meant or where it was going, just accepted it as another complication in an already complicated situation. The relationship, if that's what it was, remained secret. They were careful, discreet, paranoid about being seen together in compromising situations. But within the privacy of locked rooms, they built something that felt dangerously close to genuine. 18 months after Adrian's death, Vincent called Elena to his private quarters. The old man looked frail now, his illness finally visible despite his best efforts to hide it. He sat in a chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket despite the summer heat. "Sit down, child," he said, his voice weaker than she'd ever heard it. Elena sat. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm dying, because I am." Vincent smiled slightly. "The doctors give me 6 months. Maybe less." Elena's chest tightened. Whatever else he was, Vincent had given her a chance when he didn't have to, had supported her vision for the family even when it went against everything he'd built. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be. I've lived longer than most men in this business. Saw my grandchildren born, built an empire, survived more assassination attempts than I can count." He looked out the window at the estate grounds. "But I need to know that empire will survive after I'm gone." "It will. Marcus and I know what you and Marcus are doing. Don't look so shocked. I'm old, not blind." Vincent's expression was amused. "You think you're being discreet, but Maria reports everything to me. Has for years." Elena's face burned. "Sir, I can explain." "Don't. I don't care who you're sleeping with as long as you're running my family well, which you are." He turned to look at her directly. "But I need you to make it official. Not the relationship. That's your business. But the leadership. I want you and Marcus to formally take over everything. Joint heads of the family. Equal authority. My heirs in everything but blood." "Vincent, Adrian was my favorite," he said bluntly. "Marcus knows it, has known it his entire life. But Marcus is better suited for this than Adrian ever was, and you're better than both of them combined. You have Adrian's vision and Marcus's ruthlessness. Together, you might actually achieve what I never could, making this family legitimate without destroying it in the process." Elena's throat was tight. "What if we fail?" "Then you fail. But at least you'll fail trying to build something instead of just maintaining what I built." Vincent reached out and took her hand. "I'm proud of you, Elena. Adrian brought you here to save you, but you ended up saving all of us instead." 3 weeks later, Vincent Varelli died in his sleep. The funeral was enormous. Representatives from every family in the country attended, along with politicians, judges, business leaders, and people whose presence should have been impossible but somehow wasn't. Elena and Marcus stood together at the graveside, presenting a united front. She wore black and held herself with the dignity expected of a Varelli. Marcus was stone-faced beside her, his grief locked down so tight she could feel the tension radiating off him. After the service, they held the official reception at the estate. Hundreds of people offering condolences and jockeying for position now that Vincent was gone. Testing the new leadership, looking for cracks. Elena handled it with the poise she'd learned over the last year and a half, smiled and accepted sympathies, and reminded people that the Varelli family was stronger than ever. But when it was finally over, when the last guest had left and the staff had cleaned up, and the estate was quiet again, she found Marcus in Vincent's office. He sat in his father's chair, staring at nothing, a glass of whiskey untouched on the desk. "Hey," Elena said softly. Marcus looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "He's really gone." "Yeah." Elena moved around the desk and sat on the edge of it. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know. He was a bastard, cruel sometimes. Made me into someone I'm not sure I want to be." Marcus's voice was rough. "But he was also my father, and now he's gone, and I'm supposed to just step into his shoes like it's nothing." "You're not stepping into his shoes, you're making your own path." Elena took his hand. "We both are." "Are we?" Marcus looked at their joined hands. "Or are we just playing at reform while running the same empire he built?" It was the question Elena had been avoiding for months. The uncomfortable truth that despite all their efforts, the Varelli family was still built on blood and fear. "We're making progress," she said. "Slow progress, but real progress. 3 operations shut down. 6 legitimate businesses opened. Partnerships with people who would never have worked with your father. And 2 people dead on my orders just last month." Marcus pulled his hand away. "Don't prettify it, Elena. We're still killers, still criminals, just better dressed than we used to be." "So what do you want to do? Give up? Walk away from everything we've built?" "I don't know what I want." He stood abruptly and moved to the window. Vincent died believing we could actually transform this family. But what if he was wrong? What if the best we can do is make it slightly less awful than it was? Elena stood and crossed to him. "Then we make it slightly less awful, and then we make it less awful than that. And we keep going until it's actually something we can be proud of. That could take decades. Then it takes decades." She turned him to face her. "I didn't sign up for easy, Marcus. I signed up for worth it. And this, what we're building, is worth it. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop shifting. "I love you," he said quietly, and the words seemed to surprise him as much as they surprised her. "I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And it terrifies me because everyone I love dies or leaves or gets destroyed by this life." Elena's heart hammered. "I love you too, and I'm not going anywhere." "You can't promise that." "Yes, I can. Because I chose this. Chose you. Chose this insane, dangerous life where we're trying to reform a criminal empire from the inside while falling in love in the wreckage." She pulled back to look at him. "I'm all in, Marcus. Have been since the night I decided to stay instead of taking Vincent's money and running." Marcus kissed her, and it felt different than all the other kisses. Less desperate, more certain. A promise instead of a question. When they broke apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. "We're going to be okay." "How do you know?" "Because we have each other. Because we're not doing this alone." She smiled slightly. "And because your father believed in us. That has to count for something." Marcus's laugh was wet, almost a sob. "He'd probably hate what we've become. The enforcer gone soft, the widow who won't stay in her place." "He'd probably love it." Elena pulled him back toward the desk. "Come on, we have work to do. The family needs to see strong leadership, especially now. Give me a minute. Take all the time you need." Marcus took several minutes, standing at the window and composing himself. When he finally turned back, his expression was calmer. Not happy, but steady. "Okay," he said. "Let's do this." 5 years after Adrian's death, the Varelli family looked nothing like it had when Elena first arrived. 7 of their 9 criminal operations had been shut down and replaced with legitimate businesses. The remaining 2, gambling and certain financial services that existed in legal gray areas, were being carefully transitioned with plans to complete the shift within 2 years. The family still had enemies, still dealt with threats, still operated in a dangerous world. But the violence had decreased dramatically. The fear that had defined Vincent's reign was being replaced with something more like respect. Elena ran the business side with ruthless efficiency. She'd become known in the city as a sharp negotiator and savvy developer, her criminal connections whispered about but never proven. She sat on charity boards, attended society events, and built the kind of relationships that opened doors previously closed to people with the Varelli name. Marcus had evolved too. He still handled security, still dealt with threats when they emerged, but he'd built a team that could handle most situations without him personally killing anyone. He'd started taking classes at the local university, business management and criminal justice of all things, working toward a degree he didn't need but wanted anyway. They'd stopped hiding their relationship about a year after Vincent's death. Stopped sneaking around and started appearing together publicly. The family had adjusted. Some members quietly disapproved, but nobody objected out loud. Elena was too valuable, Marcus too dangerous, for anyone to risk confrontation. They'd bought a house outside the city, not to live in full-time, but as a retreat when the estate became too much. A place that was theirs, not the family's. It was in that house, on a Saturday morning 5 years and 3 months after Adrian's death, that Marcus asked Elena to marry him. They were having coffee on the porch, watching the sunrise, when he pulled out a ring. "I know this is complicated," he said. "I know people will talk. I know it's probably too soon by normal standards and too late by ours, but I want this, want you, want to make it official instead of just living in this undefined space." Elena looked at the ring, then at Marcus. "Adrian's been dead for 5 years. I know. People are going to say I moved on too fast, that I was sleeping with you while he was alive, that I'm disrespecting his memory. Probably." Marcus's hand shook slightly, holding the ring. "Does that change your answer?" Elena thought about Adrian, sweet, kind Adrian who'd tried to save her and ended up dead in her arms. She'd mourned him, still mourned him sometimes. But the guilt she'd carried for months after his death had faded into something softer. Understanding that her love for Marcus didn't erase what Adrian had meant, but it also didn't require her to stay frozen in grief forever. "No," she said. "It doesn't change my answer. Yes, I'll marry you." Marcus slid the ring onto her finger, a simple band of platinum and diamonds, elegant without being ostentatious. Perfect. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Elena let herself feel the full weight of what this meant. She was marrying into the Varelli family again, but this time on her own terms. Not as a transaction or a protective arrangement, but as a genuine partnership with someone who knew her at her worst and still chose her. "We're insane," she murmured against his lips. "Completely." Marcus smiled. "But we were insane before this. Might as well make it official." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the estate. No massive ballroom, no hundreds of guests, just close family and the people who'd supported them through everything. Maria stood beside Elena as she dressed, the same way she had 5 years before. But this time, Elena's hands didn't shake. This time, she wasn't a terrified girl marrying a stranger for protection. She was a woman choosing her partner, fully aware of what that choice meant. "You look happy," Maria said softly. "I am." Elena studied herself in the mirror. The dress was cream instead of white, a deliberate choice. "Is that wrong, given everything?" "Mr. Adrian would want you to be happy. He told me once that he knew you didn't love him, that he hoped someday you'd find someone you could actually love." Maria's eyes were misty. "I think he'd be glad it was Mr. Marcus." The ceremony was brief, officiated by a judge who owed the family several favors. Elena spoke her vows looking directly into Marcus's eyes, meaning every word. Marcus did the same, his voice steady and sure. When they kissed, it felt like a beginning instead of an ending. The reception was held in the gardens, casual, warm, nothing like the sterile perfection of Elena's first wedding. People laughed and talked and celebrated without the underlying tension that had permeated every family gathering under Vincent's rule. Late in the evening, Elena found herself alone on the terrace, looking out at the party. Marcus joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "What are you thinking about?" "How far we've come. How different everything is now." Elena leaned back against him. 5 years ago, I was standing in a ballroom watching my first husband die. Now I'm married to his brother and running half his family's empire. It's surreal." "Regrets?" "Some. I wish Adrian had lived. Wish things could have been different." Elena turned in his arms to face him. "But I don't regret this. Us. What we've built together." Marcus kissed her forehead. "Neither do I." They stood like that for a while, watching their guests celebrate, feeling the weight of everything they'd survived and built and become. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we keep doing what we're doing. Building something better. Making this family into something we can actually be proud of." Marcus's smile was slight. "And maybe, eventually, we figure out how to have a normal life, or whatever passes for normal in our world." "I'd like that." Elena rose on her toes to kiss him. "But not yet. We still have work to do." "Always work to do." Marcus pulled her closer. "But at least we're doing it together." 10 years after Adrian's death, Elena Varelli stood in front of the city council presenting plans for a new community development project. Affordable housing, job training centers, resources for families who'd been forgotten by the system. It was funded entirely by legitimate Varelli businesses, not a single dollar of criminal money involved. The council approved it unanimously. Outside the chamber, Marcus waited for her. They'd both changed over the years, older, harder in some ways, softer in others, but the connection between them remained, tested by time and trial and proven unbreakable. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Approved. Construction starts next month." Elena took his hand as they walked toward the car. The Varellis are officially in the business of helping people instead of exploiting them. Vincent would have hated it. Probably, but Adrian would have loved it. They drove back to the estate in comfortable silence. The house was quieter now, with fewer guards and staff, fewer threats requiring constant vigilance. The criminal empire had been dismantled piece by piece, replaced with something that could actually survive scrutiny. There were still enemies, still people who remembered what the Varelli family had been and didn't trust what they'd become. But the transformation was real and getting realer every day. That night, lying in bed beside Marcus, Elena thought about the girl who'd walked into this house in a blood-soaked wedding dress. Terrified, alone, certain she was going to die. She'd survived. More than survived. She'd claimed power in a world designed to destroy her, had transformed grief and fear and impossible circumstances into something that actually resembled a life worth living. "What are you smiling about?" Marcus asked sleepily. "Us. This. The fact that we actually pulled it off." "Pulled what off?" "Everything." Elena curled against him. "We took a criminal empire and turned it into something legitimate. We survived assassination attempts and hostile takeovers and federal investigations. We built a relationship out of the ashes of impossible circumstances. We won, Marcus." Marcus pulled her closer. "We're still winning. Every day we survive is another victory." "Then here's to surviving." Elena kissed him softly. "Together." Outside, the city lights stretched toward the horizon, full of possibility and promise. The darkness Elena had stepped into 5 years ago was still there, would always be there in some form, but she'd learned to navigate it, to use it, to transform it into something that served her purposes instead of destroying her. She'd become exactly what Marcus had seen in her from the beginning, dangerous in her own right. Not a victim or a pawn, but a queen who'd claimed her throne through intelligence and ruthlessness and sheer, stubborn refusal to be broken. The Varelli Empire had been built on blood. Elena was rebuilding it on something stronger, the kind of power that came from choosing your own fate and refusing to let anyone else write your story. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but it was hers, claimed and fought for and earned. And that made all the difference.